can you believe it? On October 13th, 2020 Gen 5, the entire astronomical community went silent, all because an interstellar object we'd been tracking for months sent out light pulses that shouldn't exist in nature. 5, 8, 13. The Fibonacci sequence. Even stranger, this happened on the exact anniversary of modern history's most witnessed unexplained phenomenon, the Fatima sun miracle in Portugal. 108 years earlier, in 1917, 70,000 people watched the sun dance in the sky. Now, on that same date, an object from beyond our solar system was pulsing light in the mathematical fingerprint of creation, the golden ratio 1.618. And just by coincidence, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory went offline for maintenance, while our best Mars imaging system has been down since October 1st. Just enough time for any inconvenient data to vanish. Tonight, we're diving into the biggest twist yet in the 3i Atlas story. Is this a real cosmic signal, or an elaborate hoax to prepare us for something we're not ready to see? Either way, what's unfolding behind the sun, where we can't observe it, demands your full attention. If you keep finding this channel, please hit like and subscribe. Only about 30% of our regular viewers are subscribed, so don't miss future updates. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing our global community. Today's bombshell, Fibonacci pulses on Fatima's anniversary. Let's start with the claim itself. It's so wild we need to frame it carefully. On October 13th, 2020 Gen 5, researcher David Sereda published an analysis, 3i Atlas, now positioned behind the sun from Earth's view, was caught sending light pulses in the Fibonacci sequence, 5, 8, 13. These numbers appear everywhere in nature. The spiral of a nautilus shell, the branching of trees, the arrangement of sunflower seeds. They're the mathematical expression of Foy, the golden ratio, 1.618, a number that seems to encode efficiency and beauty into the fabric of reality. Sereda tracks 3i Atlas through what he calls his hyperdimensional solar system model. He claims these pulses correspond to specific celestial domains. 5 equals Earth, 8 equals what he terms Planet 590 Gen 1, a theoretical body orbiting between Mars and the asteroid belt, and 13 equals the Virtues, which aligns with an object he named after Methuselah, the biblical figure who lived 960 and 9 years. Hold that number. We'll circle back. Before you dismiss this entirely, Sereda has made previous claims about 3i Atlas that seemed absurd at first, but later gained unexpected support from other data. He's not a mainstream astronomer, but he's not making things up out of thin air either. His analysis draws from Tesla, ancient sacred geometry, Dante's Paradiso, written in 1320 Gen 1, and orbital mechanics that, whether you buy his conclusions or not, show genuinely strange alignments. The timing alone is enough to give pause, 108 years after the Fatima event. In Sereda's model, 108 is a harmonic frequency of 430 Gen 2 Hz, a number linked to natural resonance by both fringe and mainstream researchers. 108 times 2 is 216, times 2 again is 430 Gen 2. These numbers appear in ancient architecture, like the Great Pyramid's dimensions and musical scales that predate modern tuning. Is this cosmically significant, or do humans just love certain ratios? The question remains unanswered, but here's what makes even skeptics shift in their seats. NASA shut down the Solar Dynamics Observatory's DOE live feed on October 13th. They said it was routine maintenance, but the timing, it's the kind of coincidence that makes even level zen-headed scientists furrow their brows. The STO is one of our top tools for watching solar activity, and anything passing near the sun. If 3 Atlas was going to do something unusual while hiding behind our star, the STO would be the most likely instrument to catch it, and yet, it went dark. Then there's HiRISE, the high-zen resolution imaging science experiment camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. It's been offline since October 1st. At the distance 3 Atlas was from Mars during its flyby, HiRISE can pick out details as small as 30 kilometers per pixel. That's sharp enough to spot structural features, weird surface compositions, and I think that might prove this object isn't just a dirty snowball from another star system. The official story. One of the camera's electronic units has been malfunctioning since August 2020 Gen 3. That sounds plausible, but a full shutdown right before the most critical observation window we'll have for months. It feels almost like a script. Add the bigger picture, and it gets even harder to ignore. On October 1st, The US government shut down, furloughing more than 15,000 NASA employees. Just 2 days later, 3I Atlas made its closest pass to Mars 9 million kilometers away, the perfect chance to get high-gen quality images and spectroscopy data. But as of mid-October now, we've seen no official HiRISE images with real detail, no process data from Mars orbiters, and no updates from NASA beyond vague claims that it's probably just a comet. The European Space Agency released a few shots from their Mars Express and ExoMars Trace gas orbiter, but they're just blurry white dots. Where's the high resolution we were promised? So when David Sirida published his analysis claiming 3I Atlas sent Fibonacci pulses on the Fatima anniversary, the first question wasn't, is this true? It was, is this a leak? Sirida even frames it that way himself. He openly wonders if what he's sharing is a hoax, or if it's information being pushed through unorthodox channels to avoid direct blame. He points out that 2 earlier leaks about 3I Atlas were written off as fake at first, only for official sources to quietly confirm key details weeks later. This is a pattern we've seen in other high strangeness cases. Information pops up in fringe communities or from unverified sources, gets dismissed, then parts of it get confirmed by officials, never with a straight acknowledgement. The phenomenon gets plausible deniability. The insiders who leaked it avoid trouble, and the public is left trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces are labelled fiction and the other half classified. Now let's dig into what Sirida actually claims the Fibonacci numbers mean. In his hyperdimensional solar system model, developed with his late partner Crystal Manaka Sirida, there are 9 hidden planets or orbital resonances that line up with ancient cosmological models. Dante's Paradiso describes 9 celestial spheres, each linked to different orders of angels. Sirida maps these spheres to orbital periods, calculated by taking 590 Gen 1, his proposed central orbital period in Earth days, and dividing it by the golden ratio repeatedly. When you do that math, the numbers eerily match the orbital periods of known planets. Earth's exact sidereal year, 360, Gen 5.256256 days, appears when you divide 590 Gen 1 by 5. The orbits of Mars, Venus, Mercury, even the outer planets, all cluster around these ratios with an accuracy that's hard to write off as pure coincidence. Sirida points out that 3 Atlas's rotation period was measured at 16.16 hours, which converts to 960 Gen 9.6 minutes, 960 Gen 9. The age of Methuselah in the Bible now. You can argue that with enough mathematical manipulation, you can make any number fit any pattern, and that's a fair point. But the specific claim here is that 3I Atlas transmitted 5/8/13 on October 13th. In Sirida's model, 5 is Earth's position in the harmonic sequence. 8 belongs to the domain of what he calls the dominions, the theoretical planet 590 Gen 1, 13 ties to the virtues, linked to the outermost edge of this inner system, if an intelligence were using this object to communicate. And if that intelligence understood how humans have encoded cosmic order into myths and sacred geometry, sending these 3 numbers would be a way of saying, we know your models, we know your history, and we're speaking your language. The alternative explanation is that someone on Earth faked this data, timed it to the Fatima anniversary for maximum psychological impact, and released it through Sirida to gauge public reaction. That's entirely possible too. In fact, it might be more likely. But then you have to ask, why? What's the benefit of creating a false narrative about an interstellar object that's already anomalous enough without extra embellishment? If this is disinformation, who stands to gain? And what's the end game? There's a third option that doesn't get enough discussion. What if the data is real, but it's not coming from 3I Atlas? What if a terrestrial or near-Gen Earth source is generating signals that appear to originate from the comet's position? That could be a test of detection capabilities, a way to measure how the public and scientific community respond to potential non-Zen human communication. It could be part of a broader disclosure strategy, incrementally introducing concepts that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astrophysicist who's one of the few mainstream scientists willing to publicly consider the extraterrestrial hypothesis, hasn't commented directly on the Fibonacci pulse claim, but he has repeatedly emphasized that 3I Atlas shows anomalies inconsistent with natural comets, nickel-gen rich, iron-gen free emissions, an anti-Gen solar tail pointing toward the Sun instead of away from it, and mass calculations suggesting an object over 30 Gen 3 billion tons, far larger than its brightness alone would indicate. Loeb ranks 3i Atlas at a 6 on his proposed scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is definitely natural and 10 is definitely technological. A 6 means we should take this seriously, not dismiss it out of hand. The Fatima connection adds a layer that makes scientists deeply uncomfortable, because it strays into the realm of the mystical. On October 13, 1917, between 60,000 and 100,000 people gathered in the Cova area near Fatima, Portugal. 3 shepherd children had told them the Virgin Mary would perform a miracle. What happened next was witnessed by believers and skeptics alike. The sun appeared to change colors, spin, and plunge toward Earth before returning to its normal position. Clothing soaked by rain suddenly dried. Some reported seeing visions, others only the solar phenomenon. Skeptics have offered various explanations: mass hallucination from staring at the sun, atmospheric optical effects caused by dust or moisture, psychological suggestion amplified by religious fervor, but none fully account for the physical effects. The dried clothing, the fact that people in different locations reported the same sequence of events, and the specificity of the prediction made months in advance. If you're looking for a pattern, it's there. A predicted celestial event witnessed by a massive crowd on October 13th. 108 years later to the day, an object from interstellar space positioned behind the Sun at the moment of its closest approach to our star, allegedly emits pulses encoding mathematical truths humans have spent millennia trying to understand. And the tools we'd normally use to verify or debunk this are conveniently offline. Richard C. Hoagland, another researcher who operates on the fringe of mainstream acceptance, but who has a background in NASA communications, calculated the harmonic significance of that 108-year gap. 108 is not arbitrary. It appears in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology as the number of sacred recitations. There are 108 beads on a mala. 108 degrees Fahrenheit is the internal temperature at which human cells begin to die. 108 is a multiple of 9, which itself factors into the mathematics of the solar system's architecture. Hoagland suggests that whoever or whatever is behind 3i Atlas understands not just physics but human symbology. That brings us back to Dante. Yes, to Dante Alighieri. He finished Paradiso, the final section of the Divine Comedy, around 1320 Gen 1. He described the cosmos as a set of nested spheres, each ruled by angelic intelligences and tied to specific virtues, the dominions, the virtues, the powers. These weren't just poetic flourishes. They were Dante's attempt to reconcile astronomy with Christian theology. Sirida points out that if you use the golden ratio as an organizing principle, Dante's 7th-century-old model lines up almost perfectly with his hyperdimensional solar system. Now, 704 years after Dante wrote those words, an interstellar object appears. It crosses our solar system on a retrograde orbit, passing within 5 degrees of the ecliptic. And if Serida's claim holds, it transmits numbers that directly reference that same cosmological framework. Either Dante somehow intuited a cosmic structure that even extraterrestrial intelligences recognize, or someone deeply versed in both human history and celestial mechanics is orchestrating an extraordinarily elaborate message. The problem is, we're operating in a near-Zen total information blackout. 3i Atlas reached Perihelion, its closest approach to the Sun, on October 20 Gen 9th. It's now on the far side of our star, invisible to Earth Gen-based telescopes, and will stay that way until early December. Whatever it's doing right now, we can't see it. The European Space Agency's JUICE spacecraft, the Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer, is scheduled to observe 3i Atlas in November using multiple instruments, but that data won't reach Earth until February 2020 Gen 6. Why? Because JUICE is currently using its high Zen gain antenna as a heat shield, and it's too far from Earth to send high Zen bandwidth data. So we wait. And while we wait, speculation spirals. Reddit forums dedicated to 3i Atlas have exploded with activity. The 3i Atlas subreddit, which barely existed 2 months ago, now has thousands of active members posting observations, theories, and alleged leaks. Some of it is noise. A lot of it is wishful thinking, but buried in there are people with legitimate astronomical backgrounds who are noticing things that don't add up. One user compiled every official statement NASA has made about 3i Atlas and compared it to actual data releases. The pattern is clear. every time independent observatories report anomalous findings. NASA issues a vague reassurance that it aligns with cometary behavior, but the detailed data that would back up those reassurances, nowhere to be found. The HiRISE images that should have been released by now, nothing. The spectroscopic analysis from the Mars flyby, nothing. Even basic astrometry, the precise position measurements needed to refine the object's trajectory, has been updated more slowly than it was for previous interstellar objects. This could be bureaucracy. It could be the government shutdown disrupting normal workflows. Or it could be something else. When you string these clues together, the observation blackout, the alleged Fibonacci pulses, the Fatima anniversary, and the fact that 3 Atlas is now in a perfect position for maneuvers we can't detect from Earth, a narrative framework starts to take shape, and it's not a comfortable one. David Serada's warning is unflinching. If these pulses are real, if 3I Atlas is truly using sacred geometry and historical synchronicities to communicate, then we're not dealing with a random chunk of ice that wandered into our solar system. We're dealing with something that knows us, something that has studied our species, our myths, our mathematics, and has chosen this moment to make contact. It's using a language designed to bypass scientific gatekeepers, speaking directly to the part of human consciousness that recognizes pattern and meaning. The implications are staggering. It would mean the Fatima event, whatever it actually was, is part of a longer timeline of contact. It would mean our religious traditions, our sacred numbers, our architectural alignments to celestial bodies, all of it might be responses to interventions we've misinterpreted as divine or mystical. It would rewrite history, but it would also force us to accept a level of intelligence and intentionality that most scientists aren't ready to entertain. It's easier to file this under elaborate hoax or fringe speculation than to seriously consider that an interstellar object could be encoding messages in the mathematics of creation. On the anniversary of one of the 20th century's most world's-end documented unexplained events. Yet here we are, the object is still out there, hidden behind the sun, doing whatever it's doing, and we're left in the dark, waiting for December, waiting for the juice data, waiting for someone to finally release images that should have been public weeks ago. Think about that for a moment. The most significant potential evidence for non-Zen human intelligence, or at least for something profoundly anomalous, is unfolding right now, and we're locked out of observing it, trapped by a combination of orbital mechanics, equipment failures, and government shutdowns. The timing is impeccable, too impeccable, so we move forward with questions we can't yet answer. Did 3 Atlas really send Fibonacci pulses on October 13th? If so, how was that data obtained? And by whom? Why hasn't it been verified or debunked by official sources? And if it's a fabrication, what purpose does it serve to release this specific narrative at this specific time? The answers, if they come at all, won't arrive until the object emerges from behind the sun. Until then, all we have is the mathematics, the synchronicities, and the unsettling feeling that something is being communicated in a language we've forgotten how to speak. But as we're about to see, the Fibonacci pulses are just the beginning of the strangeness, because the position 3 Atlas occupies right now, the timing of its perihelion, and what it could potentially do while hidden from our view, these might be the most critical parts of this entire story. Perihelion blackout, the object behind the sun. There's a window of opportunity that opens exactly once during 3I Atlas's passage through our solar system. A window where if you wanted to do something without being observed, the geometry of orbital mechanics hands you perfect cover. That window opened on October 20, Gen 9th, 2020 Gen 5, when the object reached perihelion, and it won't close until early December. For roughly 6 weeks, 3I Atlas is positioned behind the sun from Earth's perspective, invisible to our telescopes, hidden in the glare of the star that gives us life. And if A.V. Loeb's calculations are correct, this is precisely where and when an intelligent object would execute what's called a reverse solar Oberth maneuver. Let's break down what that means, because the implications are genuinely unsettling. The Oberth effect is a principle of orbital mechanics where a spacecraft gets maximum benefit from a propulsion burn when it's moving fastest, typically at the closest point to a massive body like the Sun. For an object entering the solar system at high speed, the best place to decelerate and capture into a bound orbit is right at perihelion. You fire your engines when the Sun's gravity is pulling you fastest, and the combination of your thrust and the gravitational assist allows you to shed velocity much more efficiently than if you burned fuel out in deep space. Now picture this. You're an interstellar probe arriving to study a solar system, and you don't want to tip your hand. You time your approach so your perihelion hits when you're on the opposite side of the sun from the civilization you're watching. They can't see you. The solar monitoring tools are either offline or tuned to the wrong wavelength. You fire your thrusters, slow down, and slip into a solar orbit. By the time you emerge on the other side, you're no longer an interstellar traveler heading back to the void. You're a resident, and they won't know it until you choose to show yourself. 3 Atlas reached perihelion at 1.4 astronomical units from the Sun, roughly 203 million kilometers. That places it just inside Mars' orbit, but still firmly in what we call the inner solar system. The exact dates October 20 Gen 9th to 30th fall in a window David Sereda has linked to other significant events, including the traditional calculation of Prophet Muhammad's birth date. Whether that's meaningful or just a coincidence doesn't change the fact. This object is now in the perfect spot to alter its trajectory without us noticing. Here's the kicker. Loeb has been blunt about this risk. In multiple blog posts and interviews throughout October, he stated that if 3I Atlas changes speed by 30 to 40 kilometers per second during its perihelion pass, it could reach Earth as early as late November or December. This isn't speculation, it's orbital mechanics. An object with enough propulsion, using the Sun's gravity as a slingshot, could be in Earth's neighborhood just weeks after perihelion. We wouldn't see it coming until it emerged from the Sun's glare. Already on a collision course, the natural pushback. But it's just a comet. Comets don't have engines, and you're right. Natural comets don't. But 3I Atlas has shown enough anomalies that the question of whether it's entirely natural is no longer absurd. Nickel emissions without matching iron. The anti-Jan solar tail. A rotation period tied to biblical numerology. A trajectory that passes within 0.0005% probability of 3 major planets. At some point, the pile of coincidences gets so tall that refusing to consider other explanations becomes a bias of its own. What makes the current blackout particularly frustrating is that we do have assets in position to observe. ESA's JUICE spacecraft, en route to Jupiter, has a relatively clear line of sight to 3I Atlas during November. Equipped with cameras, spectrometers, and particle sensors, it could detect activity that Earth-Jan-based instruments can't see from behind the Sun. Observations are scheduled between November 2nd and 20 Gen 5th. But here's the catch. JUICE is so far from Earth, and its position relative to the Sun forces it to use its high Zen-gain antenna as a heat shield. It can only transmit data via its medium Zen-gain antenna at a drastically reduced rate. The full dataset from JUICE's observations won't be downlinked and processed until February 2020 Gen 6. That's 4 months. 4 months during which, if the object deployed smaller probes, altered course, or showed signs of artificial propulsion, we'd be none the wiser. The data exists. It's sitting in JUICE's memory banks as it travels through the outer solar system, but it's functionally inaccessible. Then there's December 20 Gen 5th. Researchers including Sereda and Michael Benjamin have calculated that 3I Atlas will be at the Great Pyramid angle relative to Earth on Christmas Day. The Great Pyramid of Giza has a slope angle of 50 Gen 1 degrees and 50 Gen 1 minutes. A measurement confirmed by 1880 Gen 8 surveys showing its sides tilt at 50 Gen 1 degrees, 50 minutes, and 40 seconds toward the center. This angle recurs in ancient architecture, often linked to celestial alignments. On December 20 Gen 5th, 2020 Gen 5, 3I Atlas will hold this exact position relative to our planet. You could dismiss this as numerology. The universe is full of angles, and enough calculations will eventually find matches to human structures. But the timing stands out. Christmas Day, the symbolic birth of a figure representing a divine messenger bridging heaven and earth in Western tradition. If you were designing a disclosure event revealing an interstellar object to a global audience primed by religious and cultural symbolism, Christmas Day at the Great Pyramid angle would be hard to beat. Sereda goes further. He notes that from October 19, 2020 Gen 4 to December 20 Gen 5, 2020 Gen 5, is exactly 430 Gen 2 days. That number again, 430 Gen 2 Hz, is advocated by some researchers as a natural tuning standard. Unlike the modern 40 Gen 400 Hz concert pitch, said to resonate with the frequencies of nature and the human body. Whether this has physical significance or is mere pattern Zen matching is debatable. But the fact that someone calculated this timeline and found the numbers echo adds another layer to the synchronicity stack. Between now and the December 2010 fifth Great Pyramid angle, there's a critical intermediate date, December 19th. That's when 3i Atlas will make its closest approach to Earth. At 1.8 astronomical units, approximately 260.9 million kilometers, this distance is still vast. Over 700 times the Earth-Moon gap with zero collision risk. But it's close enough for intensive observation once the object emerges from behind the Sun in early December. Telescopes worldwide will lock onto it, and if there are any visual anomalies, structural features inconsistent with a natural comet, this is when we'd see them. Assuming, of course, those images get released, the pattern set during the Mars flyby offers little reassurance. ESA did publish photos from the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, GOO, a tiny white dot against the Martian sky. The images are authentic, confirming the object's position matched orbital calculations, but they're scientifically useless. No resolution of the nucleus, no detailed spectroscopy, nothing that adds to what ground and-based telescopes already revealed. Meanwhile, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, equipped with the high-resolution HiRISE camera, has released nothing. Amateur astronomers have found clues in publicly available raw data from the Perseverance rover. On October 1st, astrophotographer Simeon Schmaus stacked 20 images from the rover's Mascam Z instrument and identified a faint smudge in the constellation Corona Borealis. What he believes is 3 Atlas. If accurate, this is our earliest view of the object from Mars, but it's not officially confirmed, and it lacks the clarity we need. Where are the HiRISE images? NASA's official line is that the camera has had issues since August 2020 Gen 3, and data processing is delayed due to the government shutdown. Both claims are verifiable, but the combination of equipment problems, government disruption, and the object's disappearance behind the Sun creates a perfect storm of plausible deniability. If you wanted to suppress data, you couldn't ask for better cover. If it's just bad luck and bureaucratic slowness, the optics are catastrophic. Loeb addressed this directly in interviews during the first week of October. He noted that HiRISE would deliver images with a pixel resolution of 30 kilometers, about 3 times better than what Hubble achieved in July. At that resolution, if 3i Atlas has any surface features, any geometric structures, anything inconsistent with a fractured ice ball, HiRISE would see it. The fact that we're now weeks past the flyby with no official release raises questions that go far beyond normal scientific caution. Then there's the political dimension. On October 3rd, during a Newsmax interview, Loeb discussed the 7 primary anomalies of 3A Atlas. Immediately after that segment, Stephen Miller, who was then serving as White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, was asked whether the president had been briefed on 3 Atlas. The question itself is significant. It means the object has risen to a level of attention where political figures are being asked about it on national television. Miller's response, or lack thereof, didn't clarify anything, but the fact that the question was posed reveals 3i Atlas is no longer just an astronomical curiosity. It has entered the realm of policy consideration. What would a presidential briefing on 3i Atlas include? Presumably the classified data we're not seeing, high-resolution imagery from military surveillance assets that are never publicly acknowledged, spectroscopic analysis beyond what civilian instruments can provide, trajectory models that account for potential maneuvers and risk assessments. If there's even a 5% chance this object is artificial and potentially directed, it becomes a national security matter, not because of an immediate threat, but because of the implications for humanity's place in the cosmos and the risk of societal disruption if mishandled. Among those taking the extraterrestrial hypothesis seriously, one phrase keeps appearing in discussions of 3i Atlas, the dark forest. It comes from Lou Sixin's science fiction novel of the same name, but the concept is older. The idea is that the universe is like a dark forest filled with hunters. Every civilization is a potential threat. The safest strategy is to stay silent and hidden, because announcing your presence invites annihilation. If you encounter another civilization, you strike first waiting could let them become an existential danger. Loeb's paper with Adam Hybard and Adam Krah, titled, "Is the Interstellar Object more Alien Technology?" Note, adjusted to align with Loeb's actual 2018 paper framework for accuracy, as 3 atlas references follow this logic, frames the dark forest scenario as one possible explanation for why we haven't detected obvious signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. If most civilizations operate under dark forest logic, any probe sent to another system would be designed to observe covertly. It would mimic natural objects, avoid broadcasting signals, and only reveal itself when strategically advantageous. In that framework, 3i Atlas arriving on a trajectory that allows close observation of multiple planets, executing perihelion behind the Sun where it can't be watched, and potentially timing its emergence with culturally significant dates is exactly what you'd expect. The probe studies the system, gauges technological development, waits for a moment of maximum psychological impact, then reveals itself. Not through radio signals scientists can control, but through visual evidence anyone with a telescope can verify. The counter-argument is straightforward. Comets do weird things. Outgassing creates non-Zen gravitational accelerations. Composition varies based on formation conditions in their original star system. The lack of iron in its spectrum could be explained by depletion during interstellar travel. Its trajectory, while statistically unusual, is not impossible. And invoking alien intelligence as an explanation is a massive leap that requires extraordinary evidence. All of this is valid, but the extraordinary evidence bar is a moving target. At what point does the accumulation of anomalies cross the threshold? If 3i Atlas emerges from behind the Sun in December showing clear geometric structures, would that be enough? If it alters its trajectory in a way that can't be explained by outgassing, would that do it? Or will there always be another natural explanation to cling to, another reason to delay the conclusion that we're not alone? A historical parallel that keeps resurfacing is the Galileo affair. When Galileo observed moons orbiting Jupiter, it contradicted the geocentric model, the belief that Earth was the center of creation. The data was clear, but accepting it meant upending centuries of religious and philosophical certainty. So the data was resisted. Galileo was silenced, and it took generations for the obvious truth to be fully embraced. We like to think we're past that kind of resistance, but the pushback against even considering that 3 Atlas might be artificial suggests we're not as intellectually flexible as we pretend. What's unfolding right now during this 6 Jan week perihelion blackout could be the most important astronomical event in human history. Or it could be nothing, a chunk of ancient ice passing through, behaving exactly like a comet should, while we project our hopes and fears onto random fluctuations in its brightness and chemistry. The problem is, we won't know which until the object emerges from behind the Sun, and by then, if it has changed course, deployed subsystems, or done anything other than follow a ballistic trajectory, it will be too late to prepare for whatever comes next. Loeb has suggested that if 3i Atlas shows continued anomalies after perihelion, proposals should be made to intercept it with a probe of our own, not to destroy it, but to study it up close, to image it from mere meters away, to sample its composition, and to look for anything that doesn't fit natural formation models. That kind of mission would take years to plan and execute. But if we wait for absolute certainty before acting, the object will be gone accelerating back into interstellar space, and we'll have missed the only chance in our lifetimes to definitively answer the question that's hanging over all of this. December is set to rewrite astronomical history. Amateur astronomers have quietly coordinated a global observation campaign. The moment 3 Atlas emerges from the Sun's glare, hundreds of telescopes will lock onto it simultaneously. Any visible changes, new structures, or orbital deviations will be documented within hours. This time, the scientific community can no longer gatekeep information. If there's a truth to be seen, the whole world will see it. But until then, we remain trapped in double darkness. This object from another star system is staging an unknown drama in the solar system's only blind spot. Whether it drifts silently or acts secretly, no one knows. The instruments that should provide answers are either malfunctioning, delayed, or locked behind classified barriers. Synchronicities keep piling up. The timing is eerily perfect, and the silence from officials is deafening. Whatever it is, December will reveal, is the universe as empty as we've been told, or have we long been on an observation list, waiting to meet cosmic neighbors or hunters in the dark forest? Astronomical anomalies are nothing new, but 3i Atlas's weirdness lies in its chain of violations. Normal anomalies are just parameter deviations. A slightly brighter comet, an asteroid with an odd rotation. These only need footnotes in papers and never shake fundamental understanding. But this object is different. Each anomaly can be forced into a creative explanation alone, but together they form no recognizable pattern of natural celestial bodies. The most striking is the anti-Janus solar tail. Normal comets' tails always point away from the sun. A basic physics rule. Sunlight carries momentum, which pushes coma particles outward when photons collide with them. No comet observed by humans has ever broken this, until the August 20 Gen 4 images from Keck Observatory. Researchers at the University of Hawaii analyzed the data and confirmed it, a faint tail stretching hundreds of kilometers toward the sun, not away. Some tried to dismiss it as an optical illusion. Comets like C2020 Gen 2E3 ZTF have shown similar anti-Gen tails before. They are illusions caused by Earth passing through a comet's orbital plane, illuminating dust bands. But 3I Atlas's anti-Gen solar tail is a real ejection of material, not a trick of perspective, but requires the nucleus to hurl large, heavy dust particles toward the sun at speeds fast enough to briefly overcome solar gravity. This demands an ejection mechanism far more powerful than normal cometary outgassing, a physical stretch that breaks existing comet theories. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Joint observations by 4 top telescopes, Hubble, James Webb, etc., revealed the comet became active when it was 6 astronomical units from the Sun far beyond Jupiter's orbit, while most comets start outgassing only within 5 AU. The ratio of carbon dioxide to water in its coma is 8 to 1, dozens of times higher than any known solar system comet. A 2.8 Zen kilometer nucleus, dragging a 340 Zen 8000 Zen kilometer coma, combined with the anti-Zen solar tail, has long exceeded the bounds of rare natural phenomena. When these anomalies stack with the December 20 Gen 5th Great Pyramid angle and the 430 Gen 2 Gen day timeline, the coincidences become unsettling. When Galileo pointed his telescope at Jupiter, the moons orbiting it should have shattered geocentrism, but humanity took generations to accept the truth. Now we face a potentially grander cognitive upheaval. If December's telescopes capture geometric structures or orbits shift unexplainably by outgassing, will we still cling to natural excuses? Loeb's proposal now feels urgent. If anomalies persist after Perihelion, we must push for a probe interception mission, not to confront, but to see it up close within meters. But such a mission takes years to plan. If we wait for 100% certainty, the object will already be accelerating into interstellar space, leaving humanity with another Galileo-Janus-style regret. A historical parallel that keeps resurfacing is the Galileo affair. When Galileo observed moons orbiting Jupiter, it contradicted the geocentric model, the belief that Earth was the center of creation. The data was clear, but accepting it meant upending centuries of religious and philosophical certainty. So the data was resisted. Galileo was silenced, and it took generations for the obvious truth to be fully embraced. We like to think we're past that kind of resistance, but the pushback against even considering that 3 Atlas might be artificial suggests we're not as intellectually flexible as we pretend. 3 new layers of data puzzles now make the cost of this cognitive inertia alarmingly clear. The size dilemma, clashing signals of mass and density, estimates of the object's size have fluctuated wildly. And this is precisely the key to deciphering its nature. Early brightness Gen-based observations suggested a nucleus diameter between 4 and 20 Gen 4 km, a range large enough to contain a city. By August, high-Gen precision Hubble data narrowed this to 440 meters to 5.6 km, yet a 10 Gen-fold uncertainty remains. The core issue, brightness, depends on both size and reflectivity. An extremely dark surface would mean a far larger volume. Unusual reflectivity could shrink it to a small, dense body. This ambiguity directly affects mass calculations. According to Loeb's team's latest October analysis, 3I Atlas must have a minimum mass of 30 Gen 3 billion tons to resist rocket Zen-like forces from outgassing while maintaining orbital stability. If it has the porous structure of typical comets, its diameter would exceed 5 km. If dense, it could shrink to just a few kilometers. Compared to the previous interstellar comet Borisov, diameter less than 400 meters, mass less than 100 million tons, its mass is over 3 orders of magnitude greater. This combination of high mass and size ambiguity allows two contradictory hypotheses: a rare giant porous comet or a dense non-zent natural object. Data gaps are fostering a cognitive stalemate. Rotation code, coincidence with the golden ratio. The 16.16 Jan-hour rotation period, precise to plus or minus 3 minutes, adds another Guayi layer, converted to 960 Jan 9.6 minutes, dividing by Earth's exact tropical year, 360 Jan 5.256256 days, yields 2.65457, just 1.4% off the square of the golden ratio, 2.618. Platonists argue mathematical constants are inherent to the universe. Any intelligent civilization would use such signals to mark their existence. Mainstream science dismisses this as patterns and seeking bias. After all, no known celestial body shows a clear link between rotation period and the golden ratio. But the problem is that when anomalies like iron-gen free nickel ejections, anti-gen solar tails, and rotation-gen constant correlations stack up, mere coincidence can no longer explain all inconsistencies. Just as Galileo's contemporaries ignored the orbital regularity of Jupiter's moons, are we also deliberately avoiding clues that contradict the natural object premise? Orbital anomaly, a tactical trajectory with 1% probability. Most unsettling is its orbital signature. 3I Atlas has an inclination of only 5 degrees relative to the ecliptic plane. A configuration Loeb calculates has less than a 1% probability for a random interstellar intruder. Solar system planets share a common plane because they inherited the rotational inertia of the protoplanetary disk during formation, but interstellar visitors should be unconstrained by this. Adding to the strangeness is its retrograde orbit. While such paths can result from gravitational collisions, like the tilted planet in the HD 80606 system, the combination with low inclination resembles a calculated observational trajectory, allowing close passes of multiple planets, gravitational acceleration by the Sun, and minimal early detection. What's unfolding right now during this 6 Jan week perihelion blackout could be the most important astronomical event in human history, or it could be nothing, a chunk of ancient ice passing through, behaving exactly like a comet should, while we project our hopes and fears onto random fluctuations in its brightness and chemistry. The problem is we won't know which until the object emerges from behind the Sun, and by then, if it has changed course, deployed subsystems, or done anything other than follow a ballistic trajectory, it will be too late to prepare for whatever comes next. Loeb has suggested that if 3I Atlas shows continued anomalies after perihelion, proposals should be made to intercept it with a probe of our own, not to destroy it but to study it up close, to image it from mere meters away, to sample its composition, and to look for anything that doesn't fit natural formation models. That kind of mission would take years to plan and execute. But if we wait for absolute certainty before acting, the object will already be accelerating back into interstellar space at 60 kmis, and we'll have missed the only chance in our lifetimes to definitively answer the question that's hanging over all of this. Its velocity holds the key to its interstellar origin, but the weirdness doesn't stop there. At the time of discovery, 3I Atlas was moving at roughly 60 Jan 1 km per second relative to the Sun, a speed far exceeding the solar escape velocity at that distance. Directly confirming it is not bound to our solar system. As it approaches perihelion, the Sun's gravitational pull accelerates it to about 60 Jan 8 km per second. After passing perihelion, it will gradually slow down as it breaks free from the Sun's gravity. If it follows a purely ballistic trajectory with no propulsion at all, its speed when exiting the solar system should be roughly the same as when it entered, but any significant deviation from this expected velocity would be a definite red flag. Even more fascinating is its connection to the WOW signal. While speculative, it's enough to spark everyone's curiosity. Back in 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University detected a strong narrowband radio signal that lasted 70 Jan 2 seconds. The signal was so unusual that astronomer Jerry Amon wrote, "Wow," in the margin of the printout, a moment that remains one of the most lingering extraterrestrial mysteries in astronomy. The signal appeared to come from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, near the Teapot Sagittarius star group. Despite countless followed Xanup observations, the signal never reappeared. However, Professor Loeb made a striking discovery. When tracing 3I Atlas's trajectory backward, it passes through a region of the sky, one that is surprisingly close to the origin of the WOW signal. The alignment is not perfect, but given the uncertainty around the signal's exact origin and the margin of error in the object's trajectory over interstellar distances, this overlap is phantom enough. More importantly, the probability of this coincidence is only 6%, too low to be dismissed as random, yet not high enough to draw a definitive conclusion. If 3I Atlas transmitted the WOW signal decades ago as it approached our solar system, the timeline adds up. The signal was detected in 1970 Gen 7, and 3I Atlas has now arrived. As long as it maintained the appropriate velocity and trajectory over those decades, it could have been in the right place at the right time. But this relies on a bold assumption. The object has been under intelligent control for at least 40 Gen 8 years, maintaining a course toward our solar system while announcing its arrival with a single radio burst. This assumption is indeed extreme, but it perfectly explains a key question. Why did the signal only appear once? Because it was not a continuous beacon, but a 1 Gen time announcement. Of course, there are other explanations for the WOW signal. It could have been a passing comet that happened to enter the telescope's beam, a form of terrestrial interference that accidentally mimicked the characteristics of an extraterrestrial signal, or a natural astrophysical phenomenon that humans have not yet understood. But none of these explanations hold up. The comet hypothesis requires the comet to outgas hydrogen at exactly the frequency the telescope was tuned to, which is possible but demands extremely specific conditions. The interference hypothesis fails to explain all the astronomical characteristics of the signal, such as the expected rise and fall in intensity as the telescope's beam swept across the target. Putting all these anomalous features together, the anti-Gen solar tail, nickel without iron, carbon-Gen heavy composition, extremely high water loss rate, lack of activity in early observations, peculiar trajectory, the encoded feel of its rotation period, and its alignment with the WOW signal's sky region. You get an object that is completely out of place. It is not like any comet in our solar system, not like the previous interstellar comet to Borisov, and not like the first interstellar object 1I Oumuamua, which showed non-Gen gravitational acceleration but no visible outgassing. 3I Atlas is in a category of its own. The scientific community is completely divided, and at the heart of this debate lies a question no one dares to answer definitively. Most researchers choose to force Gen fit the data into known frameworks, unusual composition, documented. Past outgassing behavior, explainable. Trajectory, barely within statistical bounds. With a little creative interpretation of comet physics and formation theory, seemingly everything makes sense. But a vocal minority led by Loeb is speaking up. When the number of forced explanations reaches a certain point, their persuasiveness is overshadowed by alternative possibilities. Our current situation is bizarre. The data is sufficient to prove something is wrong with it, but not precise enough to figure out exactly what's wrong. The object is too far away to directly image its surface features. Spectroscopy can tell us its chemical composition, but not its internal structure. We can measure its brightness and size, but cannot touch its nucleus. All conclusions come from inferences, models, and statistical arguments, and it is this ambiguity that allows both skeptics and those who believe it's not ordinary to find reasons to support their views. How can we solve this mystery? The solution proposed by Loeb is straightforward. Send a probe for a close flyby. If we could get a probe within a few hundred kilometers of it, we would see its surface checking for geometric patterns, anomalies in texture or reflectivity, and any features that cannot form naturally. But the problem is, such a mission does not exist. Planning and launching would take at least several years, and by the time the probe catches up to 3I Atlas, it would have already flown deep into interstellar space, never to be reached again. So we can only rely on remote observations and wander in speculation. Anomalous features pile up. Each one has a natural explanation when viewed in isolation, but when combined, so many slightly wrong things happening at the same time, the probability becomes uncomfortably distorted. Either we are witnessing an extremely unusual natural object that happens to have more than a dozen rare characteristics simultaneously, or we need an entirely new framework to understand it. And whether acknowledged or not, the possibility we have avoided for so long, that it might be designed intentional and a creation of an intelligent civilization, lingers at the edge of all discussions about 3i Atlas. Loeb's alien probe hypothesis requires a special kind of courage, not the courage of a drunken brainstorm. After all, many people have wild ideas after a few drinks, but the courage to put one's name on a paper titled, "Is the Interstellar Object 3i Atlas Alien Technology?" Systematizing the idea, deriving mathematical formulas, publishing it with codes and authors, and then facing the inevitable academic criticism. A.V. Loeb clearly has this courage. Whether this is courage or recklessness depends on which side you stand on. The paper he released with Adam Hybard and Adam Crow on the Arxiv preprint server in July is half rigorous orbital mechanics and half science fiction Zen-like speculation, but its logic is surprisingly consistent. The core argument of the paper is actually very simple. If an extraterrestrial civilization wanted to design a reconnaissance probe to study the solar system without being detected, the smartest way would be to disguise it as a natural object. Give it a trajectory that seems ballistic, make its composition read like ice or rock, and let its behavior mimic comets or asteroids. Only reveal itself when necessary, either to complete the mission or when discovery becomes unavoidable. In this framework, 3i Atlas is not a Hollywood Zen-style alien spaceship, but a Trojan horse, a surveillance platform disguised as cosmic debris. The most interesting part of the paper is the trajectory analysis. Loeb and his Codezen authors calculated the delta Gen V change in velocity required for 3i Atlas to intercept the solar system's planets from its current orbit. Delta Gen V is the hard currency of spaceflight. Every maneuver consumes velocity, and the more velocity needed, the more fuel or energy is required. For a probe arriving from interstellar space, minimizing delta Gen V is essential to reach its target, and the result they found is chilling enough. 3i Atlas is close enough to Venus, Mars and Jupiter that only small delta Gen V is needed to intercept them. For Venus, the required delta Gen V is less than 5 km per second before April, and stays below 10 km per second throughout July. For Mars, the delta Gen V remains under 5 km per second until the end of July. For Jupiter, the delta Gen V stays below 5 km per second all the way to November. These numbers are achievable with chemical propulsion, the kind of rockets we build today. No exotic physics or antimatter drives required, just conventional thrust. Only Earth is an outlier. The delta Gen V required to intercept Earth from 3i Atlas's trajectory is always above 5 km per second, and sometimes much higher, but there's a more unsettling detail here. Earth is in the habitable zone. If we follow the dark forest hypothesis, if this probe were hostile, it would never approach a life-gen-bearing planet directly. It would first approach neighboring planets, deploy sub-Zen probes, and observe from a distance. If it really wanted to attack, it would choose a position that gives the target no time to warn. The dark forest hypothesis runs through the entire analysis of the paper. The name comes from Lou Sixin's novel, but it has been discussed for years in the fields of astrobiology and SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Its core logic is the universe is an arena with limited resources, and any civilization that reveals its location may be seen as a threat or a source of resources by other civilizations, leading to an attack. So the most rational strategy is silence. Do not broadcast signals, do not build conspicuous megastructures, and when sending probes to other star systems, make them invisible. Loeb's paper explicitly states that this is just a pedagogical exercise, a thought experiment, but the mathematical derivations inside are real. If 3i Atlas were indeed a dark forest probe, its trajectory would allow it to observe all major terrestrial planets and deploy sub-Gen probes with minimal fuel. Even more bizarre is its retrograde orbit. Opposite to the direction of planetary revolution, this actually has advantages. The relative velocity is higher during flybys, allowing faster data collection before moving out of observation range, and its low inclination to the ecliptic plane keeps it exactly in the plane where planets reside, maximizing observation opportunities. October 20 Zen 9th holds the key to solving 3i Atlas's mystery. It will reach its closest point to the Sun, the Perihelion, on this day, but its position will be directly opposite Earth, completely obscured by the Sun. If someone wanted to break and change its orbit, turning it from an interstellar escape trajectory into a permanent resident of the solar system, this would be the perfect moment. The Sun would block the view of the planet you most want to observe, Earth. Even if it used conventional thrusters that produce a visible plume, the trace of the engine fire would be completely hidden by the fusing hydrogen 200 million kilometers away. By the time it emerges from behind the sun in December, it will no longer be on an escape trajectory. It will have become part of the solar system. Loeb calculated a velocity change of 30 to 40 kilometers per second during the perihelion would allow 3I Atlas not only to be captured by the solar system, but even to be redirected toward Earth, arriving as early as late November or early December. This is not a slow approach that could be detected months in advance, but a surprise attack with only a few weeks of warning. The first sign of anomaly might be when it emerges from behind the sun, already on a trajectory approaching Earth. The paper discusses in detail the concept of a reverse solar Oberth maneuver. For those unfamiliar, the Oberth effect is a counterintuitive phenomenon in orbital mechanics. The efficiency of a thruster burn is highest when the object is moving fastest. At perihelion, the object reaches maximum speed as it falls into the sun's gravity. Well-igniting thrusters here amplifies the propulsion effect using the existing kinetic energy. This is why interplanetary missions often use gravity assists. Gaining or losing speed via celestial gravity is far more efficient than burning fuel in deep space. A reverse Oberth uses the same principle to slow down. If 3I Atlas fired its engines at perihelion, the sun's gravity would amplify the deceleration effect, allowing it to drop from an escape trajectory into a captured orbit with far less fuel than the same maneuver would require elsewhere. This operation is both elegant and hidden. The paper specifically notes that the optimal position for this maneuver is exactly in a region unobservable from Earth, as if the geometric layout itself was designed to cover its tracks. Is this intentional, or are we forcing patterns out of randomness? The paper does not draw a conclusion. It only defines this scenario as possible and plausible, but by no means proven, using extremely cautious language. The authors acknowledge that a natural comet is still the most likely explanation, but argue that it is premature to dismiss the artificial hypothesis without investigation. And they are right. Even if there is only a 5% chance, or even a 1% chance, that 3I Atlas is not a comet, its significance would be enough to upend our understanding. Out of caution, we should investigate rather than dismiss it outright. The public's reaction to the paper was entirely predictable. Most mainstream science journalists either ignored it or treated it as fringe speculation. Social media, however, exploded. Reddit users dissected it paragraph by paragraph. YouTube was filled with videos with alarming thumbnails. Conspiracy theorists took it as evidence. Skeptics criticized it as attention-seeking, and the scientific community mostly remained silent. A silence that speaks volumes. It could mean the idea is too absurd to deserve a response. Or it could mean the idea is too uncomfortable, and engaging with it risks damaging one's professional reputation. Loeb is no stranger to this treatment. When he studied 1I Oumuamua earlier and suggested it might be an alien light sail, he gained both fame and ridicule. Some called him a publicity hound or pseudoscientist, while others hailed him as a modern Galileo. Sometimes these evaluations appeared in the same article, but his core argument has always remained the same. Science should follow the data, not limit exploration to comfortable conclusions. If the data is anomalous, we should propose anomalous explanations and test them, not suppress the hypothesis because it is weird. But Loeb's critics also have a point. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Proposing that 3I Atlas is alien technology based solely on statistical improbabilities and orbital coincidences is far from sufficient. The existing evidence is only suggestive, not conclusive. A pile of anomalous features stacked together feels important, but none of them can be the final nail in the coffin. In science, feeling counts for nothing. So what counts as extraordinary evidence? Loeb proposed a 0 to 10 scale. 0 means definitely natural, 10 means definitely artificial, and he currently rates 3I Atlas a 6. To raise the score, several conditions must be met: detecting artificial signals, radio or optical, observing non-Zen gravitational acceleration that cannot be explained by outgassing, and capturing high-Zen resolution images showing geometric structures or surface features impossible to form naturally. But none of these pieces of evidence have been found so far. The Mars flyby was supposed to provide some answers. High-Zen resolution images should have revealed its large Den-scale structures, and spectroscopic analysis from multiple orbiters should have given detailed composition data, but as we covered earlier, this data is either unreleased or inconclusive. The European Space Agency (ESA's) images have low resolution. NASA's data has been delayed, and the observation window has been closed for months. Is this a coincidence, or is someone controlling the information? The answer depends on whether you trust official explanations more, or suspect information suppression more. Loeb admits that this scale is subjective, but it provides a framework for thinking, shifting the discussion from a binary, is it aliens or not, to a gradient of how much evidence is there. It acknowledges uncertainty and clarifies which new observations could change the conclusion. If 3I Atlas shows a velocity change after perihelion, the score will jump to 8 or 9. If it broadcasts a signal, it gets a 10. If it just fades into the distance along a ballistic trajectory, the score drops to 3 or 4. Still unusual, but probably natural. Let's start with a humbling reality. With our current technology, we can barely reach the edge of the solar system, and yet the existence of 3I Atlas feels like a mockery of our limitations. Voyager 1, launched in 1970 Gen 7, is now more than 20 Gen 4 billion kilometers from Earth, traveling at roughly 17 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. But even at that speed, if it were aimed at the nearest star, which it is not, it would take approximately 70 Jan 5,000 years to arrive. Crossing interstellar distances in a reasonable timeframes requires either extremely long mission durations, such as generation ships or probes that last for millennia, or far higher velocities. Yet 3I Atlas moves at 60 Jan 1 kilometers per second. Even if it maintains that speed, it would take roughly 20,000 years to travel 1 light-year year. Assuming it originated from the thick disk of the Milky Way, the nearest stars to its birthplace are likely dozens to hundreds of light-years away, which implies two possibilities: either its mission has lasted millions of years, raising questions about power sources and equipment degradation, or it has accelerated and decelerated multiple times, requiring enormous energy reserves. Either way, it is far beyond the limits of current human engineering. There is another hypothesis. Less discussed but far more chilling. Interstellar space may be filled with orphaned objects, ejected from their parent star systems billions of years ago, now drifting through the galaxy, only occasionally passing through other star systems by chance. What if some of these objects are probes launched by long-gone extinct civilizations? They might still be functioning, running on programmed instructions, observing and recording data, yet never able to transmit that data back to their home, because home no longer exists. 3I Atlas could be such a ghost probe, a relic of a dead civilization, still completing a mission that lost its purpose eons ago. This scenario is even more melancholic than the dark forest. At least the dark forest involves intent, agency, threat. Ghost probes are just fragments, echoes of intelligence that once was but no longer is. They speak to the fragility of civilizations. Even species advanced enough to achieve interstellar travel can collapse, be destroyed, or fade away. If we are finding their artifacts, it suggests the galaxy might be full of ruins, cosmic archaeological sites we have not yet learned to recognize, because we have been looking for active signals. Not silent monuments. Loeb's paper does not explore this angle in depth. It focuses on tactical scenarios. If 3I Atlas is active and controlled by intelligence, what might it do next? The possibilities range from benign observation to active interference. It could deploy smaller probes to study Earth's biosphere, atmosphere, and technological signatures. It could already be transmitting data back to its origin, updating its creators on what it has found. Or in the worst-case interpretation, it could be assessing threats and preparing a response. The idea that humanity might be viewed as a threat by an extraterrestrial intelligence is both absurd and terrifying. We can barely manage our own planet. We have no interstellar travel capability. We are not expanding into the galaxy. What threat could we pose? But from the perspective of a sufficiently advanced civilization, threat is not about current capability, it is about potential. Humanity went from the first powered flight to landing on the moon in 60 Gen 6 years, from the first nuclear weapon to a global arsenal in decades. Our technological growth is exponential. A civilization observing us might not care what we can do now. They care what we could do in 1,000 years, 10,000 years, and if the answer is that we could become a competitor or a danger, then preemptive action becomes rational. This is the logic of the dark forest. You do not wait for the other hunter to grow strong. You strike while they are weak. It is cold, ruthless, and assumes a universe of zero-sum competition. But it could also explain why we have not detected obvious signs of widespread galactic civilizations. They are all hiding, or they have all been eliminated by those who hid better. Next, we enter a bizarre realm that mainstream science is reluctant to step into: physics, energy, and the hyperdimensional solar system theory. David Serida's hyperdimensional solar system model appears neither in university classrooms nor in peer-reviewed astrophysics journals. But it has one distinctive feature: it can make numerical predictions. And the degree of alignment between some of these predictions and observed data is so high that it is hard to dismiss as pure coincidence. The core question is, does this alignment exist because the model truly describes the truth of the universe, or because it has adjusted enough parameters to force a fit with patterns? Currently, no one can give a clear answer. The core of this model is a number, 590 Gen 1, more precisely, 590 Gen 1 Earth days. Serida claims this number represents the orbital period in Earth days of a hypothetical planet located between Mars and the asteroid belt. This planet 590 Gen 1 has never appeared in any official star catalogue, nor has any telescope captured an image of it. But if you repeatedly divide 590 Gen 1 by the golden ratio 1.618, you get a sequence of numbers, and this sequence corresponds to the orbital periods of known planets and key resonance phenomena in the solar system, sometimes with eerie precision. For example, divide 590 Gen 1 by 1.618 first, and you get 360 Gen 5.258. Earth's actual sidereal orbital period is 360 Gen 5.256256 days, with a difference of only 0.002 days. This is not a rough approximation. It is a near-Gen perfect match, a coincidence. Maybe, but it is an extremely specific one. Continue the calculation. The next number is 220 Gen 5.7, which is very close to Venus's orbital period of 220 Gen 4.7 days. The one after that is 130 Gen 9.5, while Mercury's orbital period is 80 Gen 7.97 days. Though the match is not as precise, it still falls within an explainable proportional relationship. This pattern can also extend outward. Multiplying 590 Gen 1 by 1.618 gives numbers that gradually approach the orbital periods of the outer planets, though the degree of alignment slightly decreases the farther you get from the core value. Serida's core argument: 590 Gen 1 is the harmonic center of the solar system. Literally and symbolically, the entire solar system revolves around this axis. He links this to the golden ratio because the golden ratio is ubiquitous in natural systems. The spiral arms of galaxies, the arrangement of leaves on a plant stem, the proportions of the human body. If the solar system is indeed organized according to the golden ratio, then finding a central frequency and scaling it with the golden ratio should reveal its structure, and at least for the inner planets, this logic seems to hold. When Serida's model extends to the outer planets, it becomes even more mystical. He directly links planetary orbits to angelic hierarchies. He proposes that the solar system contains 9 additional planets, or orbital zones, each corresponding to an order of angels described in Christian cosmology and Dante's Paradiso: seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, virtues, powers, principalities, archangels, and angels. The orbital periods of these zones are all calculated by repeatedly multiplying or dividing the 590 Gen day base by the golden ratio, 1.618. Most of these periods do not match any known celestial objects, but some happen to align with resonance points, regions of stability or instability formed by gravitational interactions. That alone is strange, but the timeline is even more bizarre. Dante wrote Paradiso around the year 1320 Gen 1, describing the universe as 9 celestial spheres, each associated with a specific angelic order and virtue. It's important to note that Dante still used the geocentric model, which places Earth at the center, with all objects revolving around it. Yet when the frame of reference is adjusted, the numerical structure he described actually aligns with modern orbital mechanics. Serida claims Dante was encoding information, either from visionary experiences or transmissions from non-Zen human intelligence, about the true structure of the solar system. What's even more unbelievable is that 704 years later, 3I Atlas appeared, and it seems to echo this framework. The numbers 5, 8, and 13 from the Fibonacci sequence each have a role in the model. 5 represents Earth, 8 represents planet 590, corresponding to dominions, and 13 is what he calls virtues, another hypothetical outer planet or resonance zone. If 3I Atlas is indeed transmitting these numbers, it is essentially saying, we understand your system, we know its hidden structure, and we are pointing to key nodes, the inhabited Earth, planet 590, as the central axis and zone 13 as the boundary of the inner solar system. However, it's critical to highlight the model's obvious flaws. Any one of them could undermine its credibility. First, there is no observational evidence for planet 590. If a planet with a 590 Zen day orbit existed between Mars and the asteroid belt, we would have detected it by now. It would perturb asteroid orbits, be visible in infrared surveys, and its gravitational influence would leave traces in the trajectories of Mars missions, yet none of these traces have been observed. This leaves only 3 possibilities. The planet does not exist. It is somehow hidden, or 590 does not refer to a physical planet, but a gravitational harmonic that affects orbits without requiring a massive body. Second, the model assumes the golden ratio is a universal organizing principle, but this is a metaphysical claim, not a physical fact. Physics does use the golden ratio in specific contexts, such as the geometry of pentagons or the properties of quasicrystals, but it is never treated as a fundamental constant, like the speed of light or Planck's constant. Elevating the golden ratio to the status of a cosmic law requires philosophical assumptions about the nature of reality, assumptions that are untestable. Third, any data can be fitted to a model if enough flexibility is allowed in parameters. Serida's model includes layers of multiplication, division, rounding, and subjective interpretation. With such a high degree of flexibility, almost any set of numbers can be aligned with another, if one is creative enough. This is the same criticism leveled at numerology and Bible codes. If you search hard enough for patterns, you will find them even in random data, but that does not mean the patterns are meaningful. Yet there is a crucial but this flawed model accidentally made a prediction. Serida developed the hyperdimensional framework before 3I Atlas was discovered. In early 2020 Gen 5, he published his ideas about the 590 Zen day cycle and the golden ratio sequence, based on his interpretation of ancient texts and mathematical harmonics. When 3I Atlas was found, its rotation period turned out to be 16.16 hours, which equals 960 Zen 9.6 minutes. The number 960 Zen 9 happens to be the age of Methuselah as recorded in the Bible. Even more coincidentally, dividing 960 Zen 9 by Earth's orbital period, 360 Zen 5.256 days, gives 2.654, a value surprisingly close to 5 raised to the power of 2.618, the golden ratio, approximately 2.618. Serida never predicted that 3I Atlas would have this specific rotation period, but his model, which treats such numerical relationships as significant, suddenly had a new data point that fit. This is either an extraordinary coincidence or evidence that the model is capturing something real. The problem is that we cannot distinguish between these two possibilities without more data. One example is not enough. Multiple independent confirmations are needed. If other interstellar objects show rotation periods or orbital characteristics that align with 5-Jan-based sequences, the model would become compelling. If 3I Atlas is unique, it could easily be just chance. When interstellar objects and sacred architecture are linked, things become even more puzzling. The Great Pyramid of Giza, a stone structure built thousands of years ago, is said to hold cosmic codes related to 3I Atlas. The Great Pyramid has a base perimeter of approximately 920 Zen 1 meters and a height of around 140 Zen 6 meters. The ratio of its perimeter to height is close to 2 pi, meaning it encodes the relationship between a circle's circumference and its radius. Some researchers argue this is intentional. The builders understood pi and embedded it in the structure. Others claim it is a natural result of the pyramid's slope angle and the use of convenient measurement units. Same phenomenon, vastly different interpretations. Serida goes further. He says the angles of the 3 geyser pyramids, if extended as lines into the sky, point to specific regions of the ecliptic. areas where his proposed hyperdimensional planets would appear if they existed. The Great Pyramid's angle is 50 Gen 1 degrees and 50 Gen 1 minutes. Khufu's second pyramid and Menkaur's third pyramid have slightly different angles together. They form a sky map that, according to Sereda, encodes the positions of hidden celestial bodies. Mainstream Egyptology rejects this idea, generally interpreting the pyramids as tombs and their angles as architectural choices for structural stability. But if you're open to the possibility that ancient civilizations had contact with, or gained knowledge from, non-Zen human intelligences, encoding astronomical data in monumental architecture makes sense. It's a way to preserve information across millennia. Stone lasts, oral traditions fade, writing systems change. But a pyramid aligned with the cardinal directions, built with geometric precision, carries its message forward through time. So anyone capable of reading it. And if 3i Atlas is approaching Earth at the Great Pyramid angle on December 20 Gen 5th, either the universe has a sense of drama, or someone is following a script written long ago. Richard C. Hoagland, who has spent decades arguing that structures on Mars and the Moon show signs of artificial origin, has also weighed in on 3i Atlas. Hoagland's work is controversial, often dismissed as pseudoscience. But he has a background in science communication, having collaborated with NASA during the Apollo era. His analysis of the October 13th date, the 108th anniversary of the Fatima apparitions, centers on harmonic resonance. 108 multiplied by 2 equals 216. 216 multiplied by 2 equals 430 Gen 2. Some researchers claim 430 Gen 2 Hertz is a natural tuning frequency, more in harmony with human physiology and natural vibrations than the modern concert pitch of 440 Hz. The shift from 430 Gen 2 to 440 Hz as the standard, a note happened in the 20th century, driven by factors ranging from orchestral preferences to international standardization efforts. Whether 430 Gen 2 is objectively better, or just a preference, is debated, but the number appears in multiple contexts. 430 Gen 2000 years is the length of the Kali Yuga cycle in Hindu cosmology. 430 Gen 2 also relates to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis which takes roughly 20 Gen 5920 years to complete one cycle. Divide that by 60, the ancient Sumerian base number system, and you get values in the 4 Gen hundreds range. Hoagland suggests that whoever or whatever is behind 3i Atlas understands these cycles and harmonics, and is timing events to align with them. The Fatima anniversary, the Perihelion date, the Christmas alignment. None of it is random. It's a composed piece, a symphony where every note is placed for maximum impact. Whether this is true, or whether we're forcing a narrative onto chaos, is impossible to say, but the aesthetic is compelling. If you want to announce your presence, using synchronicity and sacred timing to send a signal is more elegant than broadcasting a simple radio wave. The mathematical connections Sereda identified cannot all be dismissed as coincidence. 3i Atlas's rotation period matching the square of the golden ratio with an error of less than 1% is odd. The fact that dividing 590 Gen 1 by 1.618, the golden ratio yields a value almost exactly equal to Earth's orbital period, is also odd. The Fibonacci sequence appearing in alleged light pulses on a historically significant date is even odder. Individually, each of these could be cosmic noise, but together, they form a constellation of oddities that demands either a unifying explanation or an acceptance that the universe is weirder and more interconnected than materialist science allows. This is where the conversation often breaks down. Skeptics demand physical evidence, show us the planet, measure the signal, provide reproducible data. Sereda's model cannot offer this. It only provides correlations, numerology, historical analysis, and metaphysical speculation. From a strict empirical standpoint, this is not science. But from a broader perspective, one that includes the history of ideas and the possibility that ancient cultures encoded astronomical knowledge in myths and architecture, it is at least worth considering. The danger lies in confirmation bias. Once you start looking for numerical connections, you find them everywhere. The human brain is exceptional at pattern recognition, to the point where it invents patterns that do not exist. Pareidolia, the tendency to see faces in clouds or on Mars, is a well-documented phenomenon. Numerological thinking can easily become a trap. Every number confirms your theory because you find a way to make it fit. The challenge is distinguishing genuine signal from noise, and models like Sirida's often lack this rigor. But the key lies in December, if 3I Atlas takes action, deviating from its ballistic trajectory, revealing a structure, confirming any prediction made by those who see it as potentially artificial models that find meaning in anomalies, like Sirida's, will suddenly seem more credible. If it does nothing, fading into deep space as just another chunk of interstellar ice. The hyperdimensional solar system model will join the long list of interesting ideas that never panned out. Yet this is the beauty of real science. No matter how outlandish a hypothesis, we can test it. 3I Atlas is still there, observations will continue, and the data will eventually support or refute these wild conjectures. This is how it should work. Even if the hypotheses make us uncomfortable, there's a hypothesis in astrobiology that's both elegant and disturbing, yet it rarely makes its way into popular discussions, not because it's absurd, but because it could upend our understanding of how life begins. It's called panspermia, the idea that life does not originate independently on every planet, but spreads through space aboard comets, asteroids, and interstellar objects. If panspermia is true, then 3I Atlas is no ordinary interstellar visitor. It's a life delivery vehicle, and what it's carrying could be far more significant than any radio signal it might transmit. First, consider its age. Studies tracing 3I Atlas's trajectory backward through the galaxy reveal it has drifted through space for an extraordinarily long time. The conservative estimate is 3 billion years. The upper estimate stretches to 14 billion years older than the solar system, which is roughly 4.5 billion years old, and potentially dating back to the early universe, when the first generation of stars was seeding the galaxy with heavy elements. If 3I Atlas is truly 14 billion years old, it witnessed the Milky Way's adolescence, drifting through clouds of gas and dust that would eventually collapse into stars and planets, already an elder of the cosmos, long before Earth even formed. What does this age mean for life? If the object has preserved frozen material in its interior, it could contain organic compounds from an era of galactic chemistry we cannot sample any other way. Early stars had different metallicity and different element abundances. The building blocks of life, amino acids, nucleotides, lipid membranes, may have formed under conditions that no longer exist. 3I Atlas could be a cosmic time capsule, holding primordial organic chemistry older than any life on Earth. The carbon dioxide dominance in 3I Atlas's composition lends weight to this idea. Carbon dioxide ice forms at much lower temperatures than water ice. If the object originated in the cold outer regions of its parent star system, or even directly in interstellar space, it would have preferentially accumulated carbon-gen-based compounds, and carbon is the backbone of organic chemistry. More importantly, 3I Atlas is releasing carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and cyanide, all carbon-gen-containing molecules, meaning it may be rich in the raw materials of life. Cyanide has a bad reputation. It's toxic to humans, but in prebiotic chemistry, the chemical processes that precede life, it is indispensable through the Strecker synthesis reaction. It can form amino acids. When polymerized, it creates adenine, a nucleotide base found in both DNA and RNA. Even the Miller-Gen-Urey experiment, which proved that Earth's early atmosphere could spontaneously produce amino acids from simple chemicals and electricity, relied on cyanide chemistry. In short, the poison 3I Atlas is releasing is actually a key to the origin of life. Critics will argue, space is too harsh radiation, vacuum, extreme temperatures, organic molecules would degrade in millions of years, let alone billions. This is true for molecules on the surface, but the interior of a comet is a natural safe. Layers of ice and rock act as a shield against cosmic rays. The internal temperature remains stable and well below freezing, perfectly preserving chemical structures. We have already found amino acids in meteorites. The Murchison meteorite, for example, contains more than 70 different amino acids, some of which do not exist in Earth biology. These molecules survived the meteorite's formation, its journey through space, and its fiery entry into Earth's atmosphere. The OSIRIS-GenRex mission, which sampled the asteroid Bennu, provided even more direct evidence. The sample it brought back to Earth contained most of the amino acids essential for life. Bennu is a rubble Jan-Pile asteroid that has orbited the Sun for billions of years. exposed to constant radiation and high temperatures, yet it still retained its organics. 3. Atlas, which comes from interstellar space and has spent most of its existence in the deep freeze far from any star, would preserve organics even better. The core seeding mechanism of panspermia is simpler than one might think when a comet impacts a planet. Some material survives the collision and mixes into the local environment. If that material contains preformed organic molecules, or more ambitiously, microorganisms that can tolerate extreme conditions, it seeds the planet with the potential for life. Earth may have been seeded this way, Mars too, perhaps even Venus. Before it became the hellish world it is today, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, many of which have subsurface oceans, may still receive regular supplies of organic material through impacts to this day. 3. Atlas will not hit Earth now. Its trajectory keeps it far away. But the risk lies in fragments. If it breaks apart due to thermal stress or tidal forces, those fragments will become independent objects with slightly altered trajectories. Some may not intersect Earth's orbit now, but could do so someday in the future. Others might impact other bodies in the solar system. As long as one fragment lands in a hospitable environment and carries viable biological material, we would essentially be introducing extraterrestrial life. The term viable is key. Most panspermia scenarios do not require living organisms capable of reproduction. Only chemical precursors, organic molecules that can kickstart biogenesis, the transition from chemistry to biology. But there is a more radical version called lithopanspermia, which proposes that actual microbes travel through space in a dormant state, hidden inside rocks or ice. This scenario requires organisms that can withstand extreme conditions, and Earth already has such examples. Tardigrades, water bears, can survive the vacuum of space, and bacterial spores can remain dormant for millions of years while retaining their ability to revive. If Earth life can do this, there is no reason extraterrestrial life could not have evolved the same capability. A.V. Loeb has proposed a future mission concept. Instead of just flying by for observations, we should launch probes to intercept interstellar objects, even land on them. The goal would be to drill through the surface and extract internal material for analysis. The objective is clear: search for organic compounds, and more ambitiously, for any signs of biological activity or structures that suggest life. If an interstellar object contained extraterrestrial microbes, even dead ones, biology would be completely revolutionized. We would have a second sample of life, proving that life is not unique to Earth. If its biochemical mechanisms were similar to Earth's, it would provide key evidence for panspermia. If drastically different, it would suggest independent origins of life, raising new questions about how common life is in the universe. With current technology, 3i Atlas is too far and moving too fast for a landing mission to be feasible, but future interstellar visitors might be interceptable. Once the Vera Rubin Observatory is operational, it will detect approaching objects much earlier, giving us more time to plan missions. If an interstellar comet were detected 1 year instead of 1 month before its arrival, a fast flyby probe, even a sample return mission, could potentially be launched, provided its trajectory is favorable. The scientific breakthroughs from such a mission would be transformative. Panspermia also has a dark side. If life can spread through space, so can pathogens. Imagine an interstellar object breaking apart, with one fragment landing on Earth, carrying microbes whose biochemistry is just compatible enough to interact with Earth life, yet alien enough to be dangerous. This sounds like science fiction, but it is not entirely implausible. The probability that extraterrestrial biochemistry would be compatible enough to cause disease yet alien enough to evade the immune system is extremely low, but not zero. The scientific community has planetary protection protocols, rules designed to prevent Earth life from contaminating other worlds, and vice versa. For example, Mars missions are thoroughly sterilized to avoid bringing Earth microbes to the Red Planet. Samples brought back from Mars or asteroids are strictly quarantined and analyzed in clean rooms. But these protocols have a flaw. They only apply to cases we actively control, i.e., deliberately bringing back samples. If an interstellar object breaks apart naturally and fragments land on Earth, there is no way to quarantine them because they have already arrived silently. If they carry biological material, we are directly exposed. Most biologists believe the biochemical differences between Earth life and any hypothetical extraterrestrial life would be so vast that no interaction is possible. Earth microbes could not metabolize alien organic molecules, and vice versa. They would be like putting gasoline in a diesel engine. Incompatible systems that simply do not work. But we cannot be 100% certain. We have never analyzed extraterrestrial life, and all our speculations are based on just one sample, Earth. If 3I Atlas is indeed carrying biology-gen-related material, it is most likely not living microbes, but chemical fossils. Organic molecules that once belonged to life but are now inert. Even so, the scientific value of these molecules would be revolutionary. They could tell us about the biology and chemistry of another star system, which elements were available there. What metabolic pathways did life use? When facing core questions like how to metabolize and how to replicate, did extraterrestrial life find the same solutions as Earth life? Even a negative result, such as discovering no organic chemistry in 3I Atlas at all, would still be meaningful. It would show that its formation environment was highly hostile to complex carbon molecules, helping us narrow down the range of environments where life could originate. The role of interstellar objects in distributing life across the galaxy remains an open question. If panspermia is true, life may not need to originate from scratch, de novo on every planet. It could have originated once on a single world, then spread as comets and asteroids were ejected from that system, and eventually landed on other planets. Over billions of years, a single life origin event could populate an entire galaxy with life. This would make life common, but also make all life related. Every form of life in the Milky Way might share a common ancestor, not from evolution on a single planet, but from interstellar propagation. This would also completely reshape the logic of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, CT, if life spreads via panspermia. The emergence of intelligence may follow similar timelines on many worlds. You might see waves of intelligence, groups of species developing intelligence within a hundreds of millions of years window, because their life seeds all came from the same era of propagation. This could explain why we haven't detected alien signals. Either we are in an early wave, and most of the galaxy is filled with newly emerging life, no advanced civilizations yet, or we are in a late wave, and other civilizations have already risen and fallen, leaving only relics or dormant probes like 3I Atlas. Social media is also rife with remote viewing claims that 3I Atlas carries microbes and plans to drop them on Earth. This is almost certainly fantasy, but it taps into a primal human fear. The idea that something from the sky could change life on Earth is deeply etched in human civilization's DNA. Ancient people saw meteors as omens and comets as harbingers of plague and war. Modern science mostly dismisses these fears as superstition, but panspermia suggests the ancients may have been half-gen right, not for mystical reasons, but for practical ones. Objects from space can carry biological material. It's just that most of the time this material is either burned up when entering the atmosphere or so alien that it cannot interact with Earth's biosphere at all. The ultimate test of 3I Atlas's biological potential is spectroscopy to find biosignatures. For example, the simultaneous presence of methane and oxygen in its spectrum. These two molecules react with and consume each other, so they can barely coexist unless life continuously replenishes them. Another example is chlorophyll, or other photosynthetic pigments. They absorb specific wavelengths of light for photosynthesis, and detecting them would be smoking Jan gun evidence. We haven't detected any such signals yet, and it's likely we won't anytime soon, but scientific progress has always come from searching for the unexpected. Occasionally, you really do find something. If 3I Atlas showed even a hint of biological activity, humanity's response would be immediate and intense. Every telescope would be pointed at it. Funding for interception missions would materialize overnight, and the entire paradigm of life's origin would be rewritten. Until then, this question remains hypothetical. Can 3I Atlas seed life? In principle, yes, it has the right chemical composition. It is old enough, and it has an ice shell that protects its internal material. But whether it actually carries viable biological material is unknown, and will likely remain unknown unless we can sample it in person. But the fact that we can seriously ask this question is a testament to the progress of human understanding. Panspermia is no longer a fantasy, but a legitimate hypothesis discussed in peer-reviewed journals. The universe is not sterile. It is filled with organic chemistry, complex molecules, and the potential for life to spread far beyond its place of origin. 3I Atlas is part of this story, Whether it carries life or not, it is a messenger from another corner of the galaxy. Its message is the building blocks of life are everywhere, waiting for the right conditions to assemble into something that replicates, evolves, and eventually asks where it came from. When facing the unknown, the information control playbook of human institutions reveals not the secrets of the celestial object itself, but our instinctive response to uncertainty. The information chaos triggered by 3i Atlas is actually not new at all. Every high-chance strangeness event that moves from fringe speculation into mainstream awareness follows the same script. Excitement at initial discovery, official reassurances that downplay significance, delayed data release, leaked information of questionable credibility, fifty public fragmentation into believers and skeptics, see gradual erosion of trust in official narratives, regardless of their accuracy. This cycle is so predictable that it might as well be a script. To understand the logic behind it, we need to look at two things: the innate psychology of belief in the human brain and the sociological rules of information gatekeeping. First, consider that fateful coincidence. The timing of the NASA shutdown. On October 1st, more than 15,000 NASA employees were furloughed, forced to take unpaid leave due to a congressional budget impasse. 2 days later, 3i Atlas made its closest approach to Mars, the best observation window for high-gen resolution imaging and spectroscopy. From a bureaucratic perspective, this may just be bad luck. Shutdowns happen, and they do disrupt operations. But from a public trust standpoint, the timing is too convenient to avoid suspicion. Behind this lies a cognitive bug in the human brain. We are born to look for a controller. This is a survival instinct left by evolution. When our ancestors heard rustling in the bushes, assuming it was a predator, even if wrong was less costly than assuming it was wind if wrong, they could die. This tendency to over-attribute intentionality is called hyperactive agency detection, and it is the root cause of why conspiracy theories persist. As long as a major event occurs, our official explanations feel inadequate. The brain automatically fills in the plot of some unknown, doing this on purpose. For example, the shutdown wasn't bad luck. It was timed to coincide with the Mars flyby to block data release. Whether this is true is irrelevant. What matters is that it sounds plausible, and plausibility is enough for the brain to cling to it. There's also that White House question Chachi interlude. Stephen Miller, then Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, was asked on national television whether the president had been briefed on 3i Atlas. The question itself carries weight. Celestial objects that warrant presidential briefings are certainly tied to strategic importance. More importantly, the question was asked publicly, not leaked, which means the media thought it was legitimate to ask. In an instant, 3i Atlas shifted from an astronomer's curiosity to a potential policy issue. And once something becomes a policy issue, the rules of information flow change. Decisions must be made about what to release, when, and to whom. This is where the psychology gets more complicated. Most scientists in the 3i Atlas research community are not part of any coordinated covered up. They are simply analyzing data, writing papers, and going through the peer review process. The slowness of data release is a structural problem, not intentional delay. But the public's perception doesn't care about that. According to NASA's own protocols, some data should have been public, but it was delayed for weeks with vague explanations. And during this period, alternative narratives on social media were spreading like wildfire. This is how trust is lost. Whether the delay is due to understaffing or technical issues, the effect is the same. Gaps in information are filled with speculation. Social media amplifies this exponentially. Reddit threads, X posts, TikTok videos. They create echo chambers where like-minded people reinforce each other's beliefs. The 3i Atlas subreddit, which barely existed in July, now has thousands of active members. They share observations, analyze images, dissect every statement from officials, and construct elaborate theories about what's really happening. This crowdsourced analysis is a double-edged sword. On the positive side, the public sometimes catches details experts miss. For example, astrophotographer Simeon Schmaus processed images from the Perseverance rover and potentially spotted 3i Atlas before any official release. After all, the crowd has resources, time, and motivation that individual researchers do not. But the downside is deadly. Without editorial filters, misinformation spreads as fast as accurate information, sometimes faster. David Serida's Fibonacci pulse claim is a perfect case study. It appeared, went viral, and now exists in a state where it is neither confirmed nor debunked. People who want it to be true cite it, people who think it's nonsense ignore it. And the truth remains unclear. When it comes to 3I Atlas, some are convinced it's an alien probe, while others insist it's an ordinary comet. This division is never random. Cognitive psychology research has long revealed. Whether you believe in anomalous phenomena, hides deep codes of personality traits and cognitive patterns. For example, people with high openness to experience are more willing to accept unconventional ideas. Those good at pattern recognition can spot connections others miss, but also are more likely to imagine connections that don't exist at all. There's also need for cognitive closure. People who prefer definite answers over living with ambiguity will jump straight to the most satisfying explanation. Whether that explanation is definitely a comet or definitely an alien object. Don't assume scientists are exempt. They're human too, and just as prone to biases. Once they make a public statement, cognitive dissonance kicks in, even if new evidence emerges. Changing their stance feels uncomfortable. A.V. Loeb has clearly stated that 3I Atlas could be artificial, while his critics have denounced this as sensationalism. Now both sides have reputations on the line. If Loeb is right, his critics look foolish if he's wrong. He's branded a pseudoscientist in many eyes. This kind of game tied to self-gen esteem makes objective evaluation even harder. There's another easily overlooked point. Papers about water resources often mention disaster-gen-related phrases like zero drought, which have long planted the seed of crisis thinking in the public's mind. When this mindset collides with an ambiguous astronomical event, it's easy to slap an existential threat label on it. On X, some claim via remote viewing that 3I Atlas is absorbing energy from its surroundings, glowing brighter, and getting ready to drop microbes on Earth. These are clearly fantasies, but they trigger strong psychological resonance. They tap into humanity's most primitive archetypal cognition, the visitor from the sky, the herald of change, the omen of the world's end as we know it. Carl Jung wrote about UFOs back in the 1950s. Not as real crafts, but as psychological phenomena. He suggested they are projections of the collective unconscious during times of cultural anxiety. The physical reality of UFOs is separate from their psychological reality. They symbolize the unknown, the other, the possibility of transcendence or destruction. And 3I Atlas fits this archetype perfectly. It's from beyond our system, it's mysterious, and it arrived at a time when the world feels unstable. Climate change, political polarization, technological disruption, each amplifying people's anxiety. If 3I Atlas were definitively proven artificial, how would we handle it? This is not a scientific issue at its core, but a political, social, and psychological one. The response would be far from calm research. Panic would spread, religious upheaval would occur, economies would be disrupted, and governments would scramble to control the narrative. That's why, even if conclusive evidence existed, there would be pressure to delay disclosure, to prepare the public first, then gradually manage the story. But this pressure would also spawn leaks and rumors, eventually destroying trust entirely. This is the inescapable disclosure paradox. Disclose too early, before understanding fully, and you risk unnecessary panic. Withhold information to assess first, and when the truth comes out, you're accused of covered Zen up. There's no perfect solution. The best Zen case scenario is transparent communication about what is known, what is unknown, and what is being done to find out. But institutions, especially government ones, are terrible at this kind of transparency, because admitting uncertainty feels like showing weakness to them. One statistic stands out. Of those aware of 3I Atlas, more than 50% are actively seeking additional information. This is not casual curiosity. It is deep investment. Some check for updates daily. Some immerse themselves in forum discussions, and others even watch the sky specifically to spot it. The last astronomical event to spark this level of active engagement was the Shoemaker-Zan-Levy 9 comet's impact on Jupiter in 1990 Zen 4. But that event was different. It had a visually spectacular impact, observable even to the naked eye. 3I Atlas, by contrast, can only be seen with a professional telescope. It has no visual impact at all. Why is the attention higher? Because mystery holds people's interest better than spectacle. The human brain is inherently averse to ambiguity. It expends enormous energy maintaining a state of unresolved uncertainty. That's why people rush to find definitive answers. Even if those answers are wrong, a false explanation that provides closure feels neurologically better than no explanation at all. This is also why conspiracy theories persist. They offer a one-size fits all explanatory framework except the premise that Simone is hiding the truth and all chaos becomes reasonable. The alternative, the universe is inherently chaotic and we understand very little, is simply too hard to accept. If 3I Atlas is indeed leading toward first contact with extraterrestrials, we need more than technological preparation, we need psychological readiness. If extraterrestrial intelligence were confirmed, no one would first ask about its propulsion system or communication protocols. What does humanity's place in the cosmos really look like? Will religion's idea of human uniqueness collapse? Will we still control our own future? These are existential questions with no easy answers, and people of different cultures and belief systems would split entirely. Think of the COVID-19 pandemic, faced with an unknown threat. People divided into factions, those who trusted official guidance, those who thought it was overblown, those who believed it was a conspiracy. Information warfare raged, and shared reality eroded bit by bit. This time, however, it will be worse. 3I Atlas is not a terrestrial virus. It comes from beyond our world. Carrying symbolic weight that the pandemic never had, it represents humanity is not the center, and our world could be upended. When that happens, the divisions of the past will be amplified exponentially, and no one knows if society will hold. Even less discussed is how profoundly disclosing extraterrestrial contact would impact mental health. Once humanity learns we are not alone, and possibly being observed, psychological reactions will split sharply. For some, it will be liberating. Confirmation that the universe is alive and that we are part of something larger. For others, it will be terrifying, a loss of agency, a sense of vulnerability, and the realization that we are not in control of our own destiny. Anxiety, depression, and existential dread will surge. Suicide rates may rise among those unable to integrate this new reality. Conversely, however, some may find new meaning, interpreting contact as a call to action to improve, to prepare, and to prove humanity worthy of joining a galactic community. Psychological frameworks for processing existential disruption already exist. Though they are not widely known, terror management theory, for example, a field studying how humans cope with awareness of mortality, would be relevant. If 3I Atlas represents contact, it also represents a kind of death, the death of human centrality, the death of the worldview that we are unique and special. Mourning this loss while adapting to a new reality is a long process, and not everyone will navigate it successfully. Support systems, counseling, and community become critically important, and right now we haven't even started preparing for them. The Fibonacci sequence 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 triggers this pattern hunger particularly strongly because it's so common in nature. Sunflower heads, pinecone scales, nautilus shells, galaxy spirals all exhibit Fibonacci spirals, or golden ratio, approximately 1.618 proportions. So when David Sereda claims 3I Atlas is transmitting Fibonacci numbers like 5, 8, and 13, people instinctively believe it. These numbers aren't made up, they come from a simple recursive rule. Each number is the sum of the two preceding ones. And the sequence generated by this rule gets closer to the golden ratio the further it goes. Nature's preference for this pattern shows it's mathematically efficient, an optimal solution to problems like growth and packing. But there's a cognitive trap here. Once you start actively looking for Fibonacci numbers, you'll find them everywhere, even when many are just coincidences. The human visual system is especially susceptible to this. Show someone a spiral and ask if it fits the golden ratio, and even if there's a 10% error, they'll say yes. We automatically adjust our perception to align with the pattern we expect. This is confirmation bias. For Sereda, he first established the framework that Fibonacci numbers and the golden ratio are meaningful. Then when he saw that 3I Atlas's rotation period could fit into it, he thought the framework is confirmed. As for measurement data that doesn't fit, he either ignores it or finds reasons to explain it away. Date connections work the same way. October 13th does have historical significance. The miracle of the sun in 1917 was witnessed by tens of thousands, but October 13th is also just an ordinary day. If 3I Atlas had reached a key orbital milestone on October 12th or 14th, someone would have found another historical event to link it to. There are so many significant dates in history that any given day can be connected to something if you look hard enough. For example, October 13th, 1790 Gen 2 was the laying of the White House cornerstone, but countless unremarkable things also happened that day. When you pick one event and call it synchronicity, it's essentially deciding the conclusion first, then finding evidence. You've already decided there's a pattern, so you only focus on details that fit. First, let's be clear, not all discovered patterns are false. Sometimes patterns are real. The challenge, however, is distinguishing genuine signals from cosmic noise, and there's no perfect method for this. Statistical analysis helps. If the probability of an event occurring randomly is less than 1 in 1,000, it deserves attention. But probability can be deceptive if you don't account for all the ways you could define the pattern. This is the multiple comparisons problem. For example, if you test 100 hypotheses, even if all are random, 5 will appear significant at the 0.05 significance level purely by chance. Without correcting for this bias, you'll mistake random fluctuations for real patterns. 3I Atlas's rotation period is a perfect example. 960 Zan 9.6 minutes. Methuselah lived 960 Zan 9 years in the Bible. A seemingly perfect match. But only if you round. In reality, its rotation period has an uncertainty of plus or minus 3 minutes, which converts to about plus or minus 0.05 hours. That means the true value could be 960 Gen 6 minutes or 970 Gen 2 minutes. If it were 970 Gen 2 minutes, could we find a corresponding culturally significant number? Probably not, because 970 Gen 2 has no ready Gen-made symbolic meaning. The fact that 960 Gen 9 sticks in our memory is essentially we only select what matches and ignore what doesn't. Let's look at the golden ratio too. The square of the golden ratio is 2.618. Dividing 960 Gen 9 by Earth's orbital period, 360 Gen 5.256 days, gives 2.654, an error of 1.4%. In engineering, a 1% error counts as a match. In numerology, anything within 5% counts as aligned. This flexible definition of error allows almost any number to be linked to any other number through multiplication, division, and selective rounding. And David Surida's hyperdimensional model uses this technique extensively. This doesn't necessarily mean the model is wrong, but it does mean its prediction accuracy isn't as tight as it initially seems. Religious significance is another imposed pattern. For example, 3I Atlas's Perihelion falls near the date traditionally associated with the Prophet Muhammad's birth, or that the object will align with Earth at the Great Pyramid angle on Christmas Day. If you assign cosmic importance to religious events, these coincidences will feel shocking. But from a secular astronomical perspective, these are all coincidences. Because humanity's calendar is essentially artificially defined, we could set the start of the year at a different time, divide the year into different numbers of days, and none of this would change the physical laws of celestial motion. The sojourn called synchronicity is nothing more than us imposing human timekeeping systems on the universe, then being surprised when cosmic events happen to line up with our holidays. Yet there's an unsettling thought here. If an intelligent civilization wanted to communicate with humanity and understood our cultural frameworks, using our calendars and religious symbols would be an excellent strategy. It bypasses scientific gatekeepers and directly targets the psychological soft spot in humans that responds to meaning and narrative. For example, sending a radio signal at 1420 MHz, the hydrogen line frequency, is scientifically elegant but emotionally inert. However, a visual anomaly appearing at the Great Pyramid angle on Christmas Day is scientifically ambiguous but emotionally overwhelming. If the goal is to be noticed, be remembered, and drive action, the latter is clearly more effective. This is why the debate over 3I Atlas is so fractious. It's essentially a collision of two equally valid epistemological approaches. The scientific camp says, show me reproducible data, mechanical explanations, and falsifiable predictions. The symbolic camp says, look at these synchronicities, numerology, and mythological resonances. These frameworks are incompatible. They ask different questions, value different types of evidence, and neither side is purely right or purely wrong. Science discovers physical laws but often misses meaning. Symbolism finds meaning, but often lacks rigor. The ideal scenario is to integrate both using scientific methods to verify whether symbolic patterns have physical correlates. But this requires intellectual humility from both camps, and unfortunately, such humility is in short supply. Pareidolia, the tendency to see faces or shapes in random visual data, is closely related to apophenia. The Mars rover images of 3I Atlas that some people interpret as showing a cylindrical structure are likely examples of pareidolia. Low-gen resolution images, heavy processing, and stacking multiple frames all introduce visual artifacts. Our visual cortex is primed to detect edges, symmetry, and geometric regularity, because these features usually indicate objects of interest, tools, predators, other humans. When we see a blur that is vaguely elongated, the brain fills in details that are not actually there. It's a cigar, gen-shaped craft. It's a cylinder. In reality, such blurs are probably just motion blur caused by the comet's movement relative to the camera, exactly as A.V. Loeb explained when he analyzed the Perseverance rover images. The comparisons to cave art are even more tenuous. Someone posted side images of the alleged cylindrical structure, alongside ancient rock art depicting elongated oval shapes, some labeled as 3-eyed. The implication is that ancient humans saw the same object, 3I Atlas, or something like it, visiting Earth in the past. This is compelling as mythology, but weak as evidence. Ancient humans drew all sorts of shapes. Some are representational, depicting animals or people. Others are abstract, exploring form for its own sake. Picking one petroglyph that vaguely resembles a modern photograph of a blurry object proves nothing. It is retroactive pattern matching. The dark forest hypothesis taps into primal survival fears, which is why it persists as a powerful idea. The claim that the universe is a dangerous place where silence equals survival is the cosmic equivalent of "don't go out at night. There are predators." It maps onto childhood fears of the dark and the unknown. Evolutionary psychology suggests we are predisposed to fear the dark because that is when predators historically hunted. Extending this fear to the cosmic scale feels natural. If the universe is a dark forest, then every interstellar object is a potential threat until proven otherwise. This is fear-driven reasoning. It does not make the hypothesis wrong, but it does make it susceptible to overinterpretation. The alternative, that the universe is largely benign or indifferent, fails to trigger the same emotional response. It is boring. A comet is just a comet. Nothing to fear, nothing to wonder about. Psychologically, humans crave narrative tension. We need stakes. A universe where nothing matters and we are alone is existentially bleak. A universe where we are being watched, possibly threatened, or possibly contacted is at least interesting. Even if the threat is real, many people find it preferable to meaninglessness. This is why apocalyptic narratives are so popular. The end of the world gives life urgency and importance. Social media algorithms exploit this dynamic. Posts that generate engagement, shares, comments, likes, are amplified. Posts that evoke strong emotions such as fear or curiosity outperform posts that are neutrally informative. So content about 3I Atlas that frames it as a mystery. A threat or revelation spreads faster than content that says, it is probably just a comet. Here is the spectroscopy data. This creates information asymmetry. Sensational narratives dominate attention, even if they are less accurate. And once a narrative is established, correcting it is difficult, because corrections do not generate the same emotional engagement. The ex-post claiming to describe remote viewing of 3I Atlas, portraying it as ancient alien technology pulling energy from its surroundings, is performative. The person posting it may believe it, may be engaging in creative speculation, or may be deliberately trolling. But the post's function is to provoke a reaction. It is designed to be shared, screenshot, and discussed. Whether it is true is almost irrelevant to its success as a meme. This is how modern information ecosystems work. Truth value and attention value are decoupled. Something can be false but go viral, or true but be ignored. The educational response to this should be teaching critical thinking and media literacy, but these are slow interventions. In real time, a speculation about 3I Atlas accelerates. There is no mechanism to pump the brakes. Each person interprets new information through their existing beliefs. If you think it is a comet, Every data point is interpreted as confirming that if you think it is alien, every anomaly is confirmation. The middle ground, I don't know yet, is cognitively uncomfortable and socially unrewarding. You cannot build a community around, we're waiting for more data. You build communities around shared conviction. This is why Avi's approach, ranking 3i Atlas at a 6 on a scale of 0 to 10, is useful. It acknowledges uncertainty while still taking the question seriously, serving as a framework for updating beliefs as evidence changes. If 3i Atlas shows non-Zen gravitational acceleration that cannot be explained, it moves to an 8. If it remains on a ballistic trajectory and fades into the distance, it drops to a 4. This is iterative and updating. Adjusting probability estimates based on new information is how science should work, but it requires comfort with ambiguity, and most people, including many scientists, are not comfortable there. The human need for closure drives premature conclusions. We want to know now what 3i Atlas is, not in December when it emerges from behind the sun, not in February when juice data is downlinked, but now. That impatience leads to over-reliance on incomplete data. We form strong opinions on weak evidence because strong opinions feel better than suspended judgment, and once formed, those opinions are sticky. Changing your mind feels like admitting you are wrong, which threatens the ego, so people dig in, even when new evidence should shift their position. All of this for pattern Dian seeking, the emotional reasoning, the confirmation bias, the social dynamics is not a bug in human cognition, it is a feature. These are adaptive strategies that work most of the time in most contexts. The problem is that they are adapted for a world of immediate threats and face Jan-to-Jan face communities, not for global information networks and ambiguous astronomical phenomena. We are running Savannah Gen era software on 21st Gen century hardware, and the glitches are predictable. We see patterns that are not there, miss patterns that are polarized into tribes, and lose the ability to hold nuanced positions. The question with 3i Atlas is whether the patterns people are detecting are real or artifacts of how our minds work. That is not a question psychology can answer. It requires physics, astronomy, and data. But understanding why we are drawn to certain interpretations, why the symbolic resonates more than the statistical, why coincidence feels like fate, that understanding is valuable. It lets us be skeptical of our own certainty, reminds us that the first explanation that feels right is often wrong, and prepares us for the possibility that we might be both overinterpreting noise and underinterpreting signal, seeing aliens where there are comets, or missing aliens because we are too committed to the idea that comets are all we will ever find. The Curious Corner, wildest conspiracy theories, every major anomalous event, attracts a constellation of theories that range from scientifically plausible to utterly bizarre, and 3i Atlas is no exception. In fact, the sheer variety of speculations surrounding this object might be unprecedented. We have theories involving ancient alien gods, biblical prophecy, government-covered Zen ups, AI Zen translated messages from space, staged alien invasions, and even links to everything from the Knights Templar to the Philadelphia experiment. Some of this is serious speculation from people trying to make sense of anomalous data. Some of it is creative fiction, and some of it might uncomfortably touch on truth stranger than the dismissive mainstream is willing to consider. Let's start with the claim from Chilean scientists that went viral in late September. According to posts across multiple platforms, scientists in Chile using data from the Atlas telescope and AI analysis supposedly decoded a message from 3i Atlas. When translated, the message allegedly read, "We're on our way, we've been watching you, don't be afraid, we're going to be there soon." The posts also claim the probe is already in contact with senior global leadership, with communications that have not been shared with the public. This story spread rapidly, thousands of shares, YouTube videos, and breathless headlines. Yet it is almost certainly false. No credible source has confirmed it. The original posts provide no verifiable details, no names of the scientists, no links to research papers, no press releases. It has all the hallmarks of creative fiction designed to go viral. But here's why it gained traction. The message is psychologically perfect. It addresses fear, don't be afraid, confirms suspicion, we've been watching you, and promises imminent contact, we're going to be there soon. These three elements, reassurance, validation, and urgency, are exactly what people, primed by months of speculation, wanted to hear. Whether it is true matters less than whether it feels true. The claim about communication with senior global leadership taps into another deep vein of conspiracy thinking, the idea that governments know more than they are telling, and that a secret group has access to information the public does not. This is disclosure with a capital D. The theory that extraterrestrial contact has already occurred and is being managed quietly to avoid panic. In this framework, public statements denying anything unusual are expected. Of course they deny it. Confirming it would cause economic collapse, religious crisis, and mass hysteria. So, the theory goes. Governments prepare in secret, brief world leaders, coordinate responses, and feed the public a controlled narrative. Is this happening with 3i Atlas? Probably not. But the fact that Stephen Miller was publicly asked whether the president had been briefed shows the idea has entered mainstream discourse. That question would not have been posed on national television if it were obviously absurd. The journalist who asked it thought it was legitimate. This shift from fringe to mentionable is significant. It means the Overton window, the range of ideas considered acceptable in political discussion, has moved. Extraterrestrial contact is now within the bounds of serious consideration. At least for some audiences, Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot have covered 3i Atlas extensively, framing it as the return of the Anunnaki. For those unfamiliar, the Anunnaki are deities from ancient Sumerian mythology, often interpreted by alternative historians, such as Zechariah Sitchin, as extraterrestrial beings who visited Earth in antiquity and genetically engineered humans. Sitchin's work, based on his interpretations of cuneiform texts, claimed the Anunnaki originated from a planet called Nibiru, which has a highly elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system every few thousand years. Cassidy's claim is that 3i Atlas is either Nibiru itself or a craft associated with it, and that the entity Marduk, the chief god of Babylon later linked to Jupiter in mythology, is returning. This ties into prophecy beliefs, the idea that ancient texts predicted this return, and that we are now witnessing it. David Serida's mathematical analysis is cited as proof. The orbital harmonics, the numerical relationships, the biblical numerology, all of it supposedly confirms 3i Atlas is following a predetermined path known to ancient civilizations. From a mythological standpoint, this is a rich narrative. From an evidentiary standpoint, it is layers of speculation stacked on speculation. Sitchin's translations are not accepted by mainstream Assyriologists, who argue he mistranslated key terms and imposed his extraterrestrial interpretation onto texts with more mundane meanings. Nibiru, if it existed, would produce gravitational effects we would detect, but no planet's N-sized body with an eccentric orbit that periodically disrupts the inner solar system has ever been observed. Yet, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. For believers, the fact that mainstream science dismisses Sitchin's work is further proof of a covered up. The alien mothership carrying Gardner probes is a more refined version of the panspermia hypothesis. Instead of the accidental distribution of organic molecules, this theory proposes intentional seeding. 3i Atlas arrives, deploys smaller probes, and those probes land on planets and moons, either planting life directly or preparing environments for future habitation. Loeb's paper mentioned the possibility of 3i Atlas behaving like a dandelion dispersing seeds. The imagery is evocative, a cosmic flower spreading genetic information across star systems. This is not as far-fetched as it sounds. If a civilization wanted to expand but could not travel at relativistic speeds, sending automated Gardner probes makes sense. They travel slowly, taking centuries or millennia to reach their targets, but once there, they terraform, seed, and prepare worlds. By the time the civilization develops faster travel, the new worlds are ready. It is a long-term game strategy. Whether any civilization would commit to such a plan, given the timescales and uncertainties, is debatable, but it is technically possible with technology only slightly beyond our own. The November-Jan-December invasion countdown on Reddit is collective anxiety manifesting as a countdown clock. Multiple threads track the days until 3i Atlas emerges from behind the sun, with an apocalyptic framing. Will it have maneuvered? Will it have deployed probes? Will Earth be targeted? This is driven partly by Loeb's calculations about potential Earth intercept windows, and partly by the dark forest framing. If 3i Atlas is hostile, late November or early December is when we would find out. The countdown creates communal tension, a shared experience of waiting for a reveal. Psychologically, this is similar to end-Jan times cults that predict specific dates for an apocalypse or rapture. When the date passes without incident, believers either abandon the theory or rationalize. The date was wrong, but the concept is still valid, or it did happen, but spiritually, not physically. The flexibility of these interpretive frameworks allows almost any outcome to be accommodated without falsifying the core belief. If 3i Atlas does nothing unusual, the response will be, it's waiting, it's already completed its mission, or the real event was hidden from us. The theory becomes unfalsifiable, removing it from scientific discourse, but not diminishing its psychological power. Mystery objects in Earth's orbit not listed as spacecraft is a recurring claim. Amateur astronomers using tracking software sometimes spot objects not included in public satellite catalogues. These could be classified military satellites, space debris that has not yet been catalogued, or observation errors. But in the context of 3i Atlas, these objects are interpreted as probes. If 3i Atlas deployed subcraft months ago, before we were paying close attention, those craft could now be in Earth's orbit observing us. There is no hard evidence for this. Satellite tracking communities are thorough, and if there were genuinely anomalous objects, they would be documented and analysed. But the claim persists because it is hard to prove a negative. How do you prove there is not a cloaked probe in orbit? The Vandenberg Air Force Base Red Square UFO incident from October 14, 2003. 2010, 2 years before the 2020 Gen 5 Fatima anniversary, is another numerological link David Sirida has drawn. On that date, multiple witnesses, including military personnel, reported seeing a massive red square Tian-shaped object in the sky near Vandenberg. It was never officially explained. To connect this event to 3i Atlas, one must believe two things: that the same intelligence has been operating near Earth for decades, occasionally revealing itself, and that the 20 Gen 2 Gen year gap between the two events holds significance. In Serida's framework, this ties to harmonic frequencies and Fatima symbolism. Since October 14th is one day after the Fatima anniversary, October 13th, this is numerology at its most flexible. Any two events can be linked if you allow enough leeway. But for those already convinced a pattern exists, each new connection reinforces their belief. It forms a web of meaning where every thread supports the others. Pulling one thread doesn't collapse the web, it simply tightens elsewhere. This makes the theory resilient but untestable. If everything is connected, nothing can prove the connection's false. The Jeffrey Epstein files distraction theory takes a more cynical tone. It posits that the 3i Atlas story was pushed by intelligence agencies to divert public attention from politically damaging revelations. The timing, proponents argue, is suspicious. 3i Atlas was discovered in July, and Epstein's related documents were released around the same time. Two major news cycles competing for public focus. In this view, astronomical phenomena are tools of information warfare. Got a story you want buried? Just release something exotic to dominate headlines. Avi Loeb addressed this directly, noting that 3i Atlas is a physical object observable by anyone with a decent telescope. It exists independently of terrestrial politics. The overlap between its discovery and other news, he argues, is mere coincidence. But the theory persists because it fits a worldview where nothing is random, powerful actors manipulate everything, and surface narratives always hide deeper truths. Living in this worldview is exhausting, yet seductive. It makes you feel informed or awake, while others are asleep. Project Blue Beam is the grandparent of fake alien invasion theories, first proposed by journalist Serge Monast in the 1990s. It claims global elites plan to stage a false extraterrestrial contact event using holograms, advanced aircraft, and media manipulation. The goal: create a common threat that justifies a world government, centralized control, and the suppression of individual freedoms. In the Blue Beam scenario, 3i Atlas would be part of the setup, a real object, but one whose nature is misrepresented to prime the public for the stage reveal. When the fake aliens appear, people will believe it, because months of speculation about 3i Atlas have already prepared them. This theory requires near-gen omnipotent coordination among global powers, which is implausible given how fractious international relations actually are. Yet it resonates because it explains anomalies. Why are governments evasive about 3i Atlas? They're managing the narrative for Blue Beam. Why is data delayed? To buy time for fabrication. Any evidence or lack thereof can be folded into the theory. Real anomalies are part of the script, no anomalies mean the script is working. It's a closed loop. That said, the belief that we're being prepared for staged disclosure through incremental revelations has some merit. Even without invoking Bluebeam, if governments did have evidence of extraterrestrial life or technology, sudden full disclosure would be deeply disruptive. A gradual process hinting, allowing speculation, releasing ambiguous data builds tolerance. By the time official confirmation comes, it's anticlimactic. Everyone already half-jant believed it. This is how normalization works. The fringe becomes mainstream not through definitive proof, but through repeated exposure. 3i Atlas, regardless of what it actually is, functions as a normalization event for the idea that interstellar objects might be artificial. The question is this normalization accidental or intentional? Occam's razor suggests it's accidental. 3i Atlas is a comet. Its weird properties stem from the fact that comets are inherently variable and people are reading too much into it. But Occam's razor is a heuristic, a rule of thumb, not a law. The simplest explanation is often correct, but not always. And when intelligence, human or non-human, is involved, simple explanations can miss deception. If you want to hide a probe, make it look like a comet. If you want to manage public reaction, release data slowly. Both strategies make the simple explanation. It's just a comet. The government is just slow appear correct even when it's not. The difficulty lies in distinguishing genuine conspiracies from patterns and seeking and randomness. Some conspiracies are real, Mankultra, Watergate, the Tuskegee experiment. These happened. Governments and organizations do coordinate in secret, manipulate information, and lie, but most conspiracy theories are wrong. The challenge is developing filters that catch real conspiracies without falling for false ones. This requires skepticism in both directions, skeptical of official narratives, but also skeptical of alternative ones. Most people pick a side and stick to it. Always trust authorities or always distrust authorities. Neither strategy is optimal. With 3i Atlas, the optimal approach is to wait for more data while entertaining multiple possibilities. It's probably a comet, 90%. It might be an artificial probe, 5%. It could be an exotic natural phenomenon, 4%. It might be an elaborate hoax or psyop, 1%. As new data arrives, adjust these probabilities. If 3i Atlas maneuvers, the artificial probe chance jumps to 80% if it fragments naturally. The comet chance rises to 99%. This keeps thinking flexible without abandoning judgment. Right now, with 3i Atlas hidden behind the sun and data delayed, flexibility is the most honest position anyone can hold.